OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And you're very welcome along this Monday morning. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed myself and Eoin with you all the way through until 10. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can text that number if you want. You can also leave a comment, of course, on the YouTube channel. We read them all, even the ones that are pretty disgusting. Eoin, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, Ger. Good morning.
This is a perfect weekend of Irish sport, right? We beat the Great Britain team. I mean, are the Welsh and Scots so bad at hockey that they need to join with England? I'm just saying. Doesn't matter, we actually beat them. And then Ireland set up a grandstand finish to the Six Nations where we might even finish second. What a weekend. What a great level of achievement now we're aspiring to. But no, I'm pretty happy. We kick a last-minute winner. That'll do.
Like, by the way, the Grand Slam is going to happen for Wales this weekend. Like, I hope everybody realises that was the subtext to Saturday afternoon. France not being in the hunt for a Grand Slam going into this weekend is going to dial them down just enough for Wales to win the Grand Slam. I think we should just probably set those parameters out here pretty early on a Monday morning. But no, to your point, Ireland's getting the job done against Scotland, and that's kind of what it was, really. It's good to see Ireland winning, I guess, from their perspective. Andy Farrell came out a couple of weeks ago and said, we need to win against Italy, and then we're going to try and win against Scotland, and then we're going to try and win against England. There may have been a little bit of frustration because after two defeats, people maybe expected Andy Farrell to start looking towards next year and the year after and play the kids and axe Johnny Sexton as an international rugby player and all that sort of thing. And he hasn't done that. He stuck by his guns and he wanted to win these three games, and he's done 2 out of the 3. So from an Ireland standpoint and from the coaching standpoint, from the player standpoint, they've gone and done so far what they said they wanted to do. So you can't really be too critical of them winning a game of rugby, especially given the fine margins that we saw existing in the first week in particular, which saw Ireland come up short against Wales. I think if you're going to hammer them for that in the first week, then maybe accepting the fact that they got over the line and giving them credit for that is probably important too, even though it was far from a perfect performance.
No, it wasn't a perfect performance, but I don't think anybody actually claims it was a perfect performance. That's the thing. So my mates, and certainly Twitter, seems to be very glass half empty. But this is like a declining period of Irish rugby. This is a bit of a disaster, really, papering over the cracks. I'm like, hang on a second. All teams go through building phases, and we're currently in a building phase. Whether we like it or not, the whole notion that there should be no transition from one coaching ticket to a new coaching ticket. The playing staff are still very similar, and so you would think that would ease the period of transition. But there have been some fairly significant changes. We have a new fullback. We have a new back row makeup. Will Connors is in that team. I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. Ryan Baird came off the bench. And we've had Craig Casey make enough of an appearance now that we can begin to think he's going to be part of our World Cup squad more than likely at this stage. Plus, you have to factor in that we didn't have Caelan Doris. There was the French match where we didn't have James Ryan. Like, enough has gone wrong for Andy Farrell that he deserved a little bit of luck that he got yesterday when the ball bounces back off the head and Henshaw touches down for that first try. I thought that the performance was, all things considered, weather conditions and Scotland not being bad for the first time in a long time, pretty decent.
Decent probably is as far as I would go. Grand is how I would describe it. Like, when you come up against a team who have a massive malfunction in one of their key areas, there's
how
only
did that
so much
malfunction
credit
happen?
In the lineout.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Well, you're going to say it was Irish pressure.
Well, there's no involvement in Ireland in making the opposition screw up.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Scotland also deserve a huge amount of credit for allowing Ireland to be so effective at the line-out. Like, there is no way a Tier 1 test nation can be that pathetic off their own throw and you just give the entire reason for that to the opposition. Of course, Paul O'Connell has made Ireland's line-out so much better. It was Ireland's weakest weapon at the end of last year, and now it's one of Ireland's most effective weapons by the looks of things. But it doesn't mean that Scotland weren't crap in the line-out. And if you have a Tier 1 nation who's going to fall away in one significant department, then you're not going to stand a chance of winning many games. So I think that's significant to bear in mind. I do think on the other side of things,
how much credit are you giving Ireland for actually doing that? That, like, is it 50% of the lineouts that we won were down to us? Is it 10% is down to us and the rest down to Scotland being crap? Like that, you have to give Ireland some sense of, yeah, okay, we did that. We put the pressure on them. That got the psychology of the Scottish line-out a bit screwed very early on, and we turned the screw on that. Look, I don't think the defence is very good at the moment, which is a chronic issue, really, considering that every match that we've had, we've conceded tries that are on our defence, and also the defence in the last 10 minutes allowed Scotland to gain massive chunks of yardage, and that I'm very surprised by, given that our head coach is a defensive guru. I would definitely be concerned about that, but I think that's fixable compared to some of the other stuff.
One of the key things you said there about Scotland and their line out and how quickly they fell away once they realised they were in trouble in that department. Like, I think that sums up what Scotland have been for the last 20 years. Sure, they're a better team and they've got a collection of better players, but there have been times over the last couple of decades where Scotland have disappointed their own fans by not putting up enough of a fight at certain points of the game. Like, their line-out fall away too easily yesterday, for example, once they saw that Ireland were getting a stranglehold in that department. Maybe they did. Maybe that was still a very Scottish thing to happen to them yesterday. Now, you can say, to counter that they were 14 points down and managed to come back into the game. I would maybe say that Ireland gave them a bit of a helping hand in that regard. Like, a couple of the tries, they happen in slow motion. The second try and the third try, or the first and the second try for Scotland, they happen in slow motion, and you think to yourself, did that really just happen? This is obviously going to go to a TMO, and this can't really happen. Like, looking at players playing as if they've heard a referee's whistle and are sort of jogging around the place. That's sort of what happened. So I think Ireland gave them a big helping hand in that. And like, while they may have a really talented bunch of players, I would like, if you're a Scottish rugby fan waking up this morning and you look at Paul O'Connell's quotes from last week saying this is the best team they've had in 20 years, you got to hope that next year is going to be the best team they have in 21 years, and the year after that to get better again, because this is not a team that is going to win a Six Nations. Like, it is a team who will still go and beat England every few years or beat Ireland every few years. They will not go back to back to back and win multiple games and challenge for a title. So I don't think, and I know this is not what you're saying, but I don't think we should be hanging our hat on a win against Scotland in the Six Nations as some sort of marker that Ireland are back to being one of the best teams in the world.
But hang
this
on,
weekend is that barometer.
Like, even if we beat England, we're not back to be one of the best teams in the world, essentially, because
it's a better barometer. Well,
the progress is going in the right direction, but there's clear signs of progress, I would argue. Like, I think it's pretty easy to be down on any team, particularly the Irish rugby team, because at some stage, the amount of players we have versus the other Tier 1 nations, the fact that we have 4 professional teams to choose from and anybody who ever leaves is not allowed to play for us ever again, means that we don't have a full pick of players. And that's on us, that's on the organisation, I understand that. But at the same time, like, we have to be relatively realistic. We're not going to be one of the top 3 teams in the world at all points ever. And we're coming down off that. And like, we came down off that, essentially, it seems like the last week of 2018. All of 2019 was a down. All of 2020 was trying to rebuild. And it's fair to say that if you take the whole campaign as a whole, the red card, okay, it's our fault. It's Peter O'Mahony's fault for getting sent off. It's not the head coach's fault, I would argue. It's Peter O'Mahony's fault. That's a chronic issue in that game. I mean, if Billy Burns kicks to touch, we might even still beat the Welsh. The French team, we played relatively well against France, and again, but for some fairly horrific defensive lapses, might have beaten a French team who, it turns out, are really good. Everybody was saying the England-France game, the quality of rugby in that game was so high compared to the quality of the rugby in the game between Ireland and Scotland. And fair enough, but the conditions are different, and the match conditions are different, and the fact that there's a really early try scored. I just think that this negativity around the Irish rugby team is a fairly easy to fall position for people to have, and I think that there's been enough signs that Andy Farrell's getting more right than wrong.
Like, that's a different question entirely. Is Andy Farrell getting more right than wrong? I think he is, and I think some of the key decisions that he has made have been correct. Like, again, this rush to maybe look at a new out half over the last few weeks, maybe that was totally misplaced in hindsight, because you look at the last few minutes of the game yesterday, is there another out half in the country, fit or not so fit, that you would want standing over that ball with 75 minutes gone to ping it from the sideline? Of course not. And if you're in Andy Farrell's shoes, do you not try and cling on to Johnny Sexton for every last ounce he's going to give Ireland? Like, it's obvious what he's going to do. I think when it comes to his own coaching staff, I think the Paul O'Connell appointment looks like a really good one. I think Andy Farrell has done well over the last few weeks. That's not what I'm talking about at all. And maybe nobody is waking up this morning thinking that Ireland are back. I just think it's Scotland. Like, and Scotland weren't amazing yesterday, and they showed a little bit of flakiness. Is all I'm saying. Now, when you look at some of the Ireland performers yesterday, like you look at Robbie Henshaw coming into the form of his life at the moment. I know his midfield partner in Gary Ringrose wasn't sensational yesterday, but they're starting to build up relationships across that backline now where you're like, this starts to make a lot of sense. Like Hugo Keenan seems to have the 15 jersey as well, and himself and Henshaw look immovable in the backs. There's going to be a place open on the wing for sure this weekend. I thought Keith Earls on the other wing was brilliant yesterday. And if we want to go through positives, there are a ton of positives from the pack as well. And I think when Andy Farrell, he might have been under a slight bit of pressure to maybe change up his hooker or his first choice hooker over the last few weeks. When we saw Rob Herring's name on the team sheet last week, you could have been forgiven for thinking, God, I wanted to see Ronan Kelleher start. And actually, Rob Herring completely proved himself and vindicated Farrell's decision yesterday. So there are a wealth of positives that I can go through, and I'm not missing that point whatsoever.
Okay.
I'm just not waking up this morning absolutely buzzing.
Okay, we're going to get to Alan Quinlan in just a minute. We do want to talk about the situation at Arsenal where Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang didn't come off the bench, didn't start the game, wasn't picked for the North London derby, the biggest game of the year. From an Arsenal perspective, particularly the way things are going right now, they absolutely desperately needed to win, and in their time of crisis they didn't pick him because he was late.
Apparently so. He was late, and there is video, or there is some sort of footage online of him stuck in his car at about midday, which is, we have it up on screen here. So if anyone is wondering why Aubameyang is late, said Peter King, he was disciplined for being late. This is him stuck in traffic at 12 on Muswell Hill. I just did a quick Google there, and that is 15 minutes from the Emirates Stadium. So for a 4:30 kickoff, what time do people need to be at the Emirates? I don't know, but he should have possibly got there by 12:30 or a little bit later, maybe, if the traffic allowed. But anyway, he didn't start. He was on the bench, didn't come on, as you say, and he was disciplined for it. Mikel Arteta seriously rolling the dice with this decision. But I think that the dice was a little bit loaded in Arteta's favour, considering it is this season and not last season. I'm not sure if Arteta makes the same decision if it's 12 months ago, to be honest with you. I think that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is a man you do not do this to ahead of a North London derby. But this season, I think he was like, is the drop off to Alexandre Lacazette that big? And on this season's evidence, it's actually not. And it paid off. And I think the big talking point from their perspective is that he didn't get duped and he didn't get done by Jose Mourinho for the second time in a season.
Okay, we'll come back to this a little bit later on. Is it a Billy Big Balls decision, or is it actually a little bit stupid?
Well, it's Billy Big Balls in hindsight.
But at the time, pre-match, when you saw, and if you, like, it's a disciplinary matter, you want your best players in the pitch. I don't know. We can talk about this with David Meyler a little bit later on, I guess, because how the players respond is important, and they obviously responded relatively well.
Yeah, and I think that it sets... we don't know what Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is like in the dressing room, whether or not he is floating close to the edge of the rules every so often, or how Mikel Arteta actually views him as a player. Maybe this was a build-up of things. Maybe it's a complete isolated incident. Maybe Arteta was in a bad mood and just wanted to put the foot down and say, listen, I'm the boss in this dressing room. And maybe he felt he needed to make an example of somebody. I don't know what the situation is. All I know is that it paid off really well for Arteta in the end, because first of all, he got the win without Aubameyang, and that sends a message to him that actually we can leave you out and we can win a really important game without you. Don't be late next time. And maybe that's what he needs. Maybe he just needs a kick up the backside this season. Again, there's a multitude of personal things that have been going on in everybody's life, and that's no different for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang this season. And I'm sure that's contributed to poor form throughout the year. But Mikel Arteta knows a lot better than a lot of people when it comes to how to get the best out of Aubameyang.
All right, let's move on. It's 7:44 this morning. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Alan Quinlan standing by. We'll get to him straight away. Sports pages at 8:10. David Meyler at 8:15. Brian Kerr at 8:35. Golf with Nathan at 8:50. Look at the Ireland situation as well. Our performance rankings at 9:10. And Kenny Cunningham at 9:30. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
Myself and Eoin are slightly divided. I'm relatively positive about the outcome and the direction that we're trending. I think that there's...
You're only positive, Ger, because Wales continued on their impressive fashion of winning their fourth match the weekend.
I've done my bit for the Welsh. There's nothing more. It's in their hands now against the French next weekend. We should maybe, though, we'll get to the positives, but let's start with the negatives. And James Lowe's defence keeps coming up. as an issue week after week after week. We had Brian O'Driscoll on the show a while back, and he talked about his tackle technique. He's a grabber as opposed to somebody who's kind of actually at this stage of his career tackling. And Ron O'Gara talks constantly about the difference between the Southern Hemisphere that he comes up in and try to be an entertainer versus what he's doing here. Is it fixable, I suppose, is the question I'm asking. And if it is fixable, is it worth persevering with? Or if it's not fixable, do you just say, look, you're going to be a fringe player in this squad unless you fix that?
I would hope it's fixable. I think it's not like it's incredible when it's a tackle technique and maybe it's just an urgency and maybe it's a mentality. And Ronan was saying that yesterday, that maybe it's just the way he plays, the free-flowing game and the dominance he's had with Leinster and probably the less amount of tackles he's had to make when he plays in the blue jersey. He's a very physical player, so he's not shy of contact, so it's not something that he's a bit soft underneath. I think it's a technique thing. I think he needs more urgency. He probably needs to be sharper and fitter at that level. He's a big, strong guy, and the dominant parts of his game and his strengths are going forward with the ball and his aggression and his kicking game can be very good with the left boot. But is it fixable? I don't know him well enough, and we haven't seen we've seen flaws exposed at this level. And I always say this to people, to step up to international level, there's more pace, there's more tempo to the game, less time on the ball. You get punished for mistakes, and he's been punished for mistakes. A couple of poor reads in the Welsh game. He grabs Brice Doolan for the penalty try, the second French try, where he needs to smother him there, just kill the ball. And yesterday just much too high on Hugh Jones, and he's got to smash him there. And but it was past the defence, and they're on the back foot, so maybe it's the system is not helping him either, and there's a bit of indecision there from him. But he just doesn't look himself. He looks for such a guy who's always played, and what we've seen of him here in Ireland, a smile on his face, full of energy. He's just lacking something at the moment. So I'm always wary of casting people aside, because I think he has a lot of qualities, and I feel for him. Any player misses a tackle out in the field, you hope you get a chance to atone for it, and your team win the match. He didn't probably get a chance to atone for it because he was taken off, but Ireland won the match, so there's a little bit of comfort there. But they made it very, very difficult, and you get punished for those mistakes. So do you persevere with him? I don't know. I think it's very difficult for him to be selected next week. Maybe it'll do more harm than good. You always expect a reaction from players, but it's a couple of matches now where he's made these mistakes. And as I said, look, it's a lonely place out there in a field, international rugby, when things go wrong for you. And there's a lot of scrutiny on his performance at the moment. I wouldn't write him off as an international player. I would never do that, because I think he has a lot of qualities. But he needs to, maybe when he goes back to Leinster with Stuart Lancaster and some individual work with Simon Easterby on that defensive stuff and chatting to senior players, he can put this behind him and bounce back, hopefully.
When you mentioned the assistant there, Alan, people listening to commentary yesterday will have heard you maybe getting a little bit impatient with the lateral defence from Ireland when Scotland looked like they were going to really come back into the game. How big an issue is that for Ireland, especially if they're looking to hold a lead in a game, that their line speed perhaps isn't where it should be, or isn't where some of the other Six Nations teams, a la England and France, are currently at?
Well, Scotland had a scrum when Russell has gone off the field. There's still 14 points in it, and they have a scrum near their own 22, and they work it from right to left. And Robbie Henshaw ends up making a tackle on near the Ireland 10-metre line in their own half, scrambling across the field to put Van der Merwe into touch. And I just remember looking at that one thinking, why are we so passive? We're not coming forward. We're literally turning our bodies out to the touchline and saying, play away, run forward, get 8-10 yards. Scottish player passes the ball another 8-10 yards, and putting it right out to the winger. The numbers are there, so they're not making a clean line break, but they're making massive inroads. And I couldn't believe it, how passive it was. you've got to get your 10, get your 7 off the scrum as quick as you can, scrum half, get your 10, 12, 13 to be much more aggressive. They've got to push a little bit wider. Okay, you can't let Stuart Hogg run through you, and there's a chance that he'll try that if he sees a little bit of separation. But it was just turn your bodies out to the touchline and run kind of laterally and backwards and let Scotland pass the ball out to the touchline. They ran the ball 30, 40 yards there. Okay, they're not making a clean line break, but Ireland could have stopped that. And then it was evident again from the free kick when they played a couple of phases. First of all, Sam Johnson wriggles and jumps and skips and gets through 3 or 4 players and gets 10, 12 yards forward. Then on the left-hand side of the field, Ty Byrne is waving players to come out. So again, the numbers aren't there. The identification, we're too bunched in around the breakdown. And you know, we go passive again. And James Lowe misses the tackle on Hugh Jones, which he should make the tackle. And you end up, the idea defensively is that if you're down numbers, that you push the opposition to the touchline and then hopefully get the numbers even. And then you can attack and go after the players and use the touchline as an extra defender. But we're kind of running backwards there. And maybe they can't see it or identify that themselves when they're there. I'm sure when they look back on the video of it, and Simon Easterby's defensive coach would be frustrated with that. Andy Farrell was defensive coach for this team for years, would be frustrated with that. You can't just shoot up and get disjointed and not have a flat line. Okay, you can probably come as hard there when you're defending, particularly the one out from the opposition 22. But you've got to be a little bit more proactive going forward there and not let the opposition run out. And rely on your inside centre to come across the field and scramble the winger into touch. It's good cover from Henshaw, and he had a brilliant game yesterday, but we're just very passive, and the opposition are doing the opposite to us. They're sprinting off the line.
Is there any
They're
reason,
making it so difficult.
Is there any reason when you look at the team, so we've been talking all week about how dangerous this team was, and they have pace on the wings, and they also have 2 of the best game breakers in World Rugby at the moment at 10 and 15. Are you passive in those games because you want them to play in front of you and you don't want to give them the opportunity? Was it perhaps strategic?
No, I think, most of the defence was good in the early parts of the game for the first 50 or 60 minutes. You know, their first try is a mistake from Gary Ringrose. Stander gets a brilliant turnover, and we forced them into a lot of mistakes. We put massive pressure on their line out, but we're not putting massive pressure defensively consistently enough. At times we are. And, the effort, one-on-one tackles, they're big forwards. We smashed them backwards. We put in great tackles. We harried and harassed them at the breakdown. So there's a lot of good stuff there. But then that's the real key area that the top teams will smother out the opposition. Like at 24-10, of course Scotland are going to start throwing the ball around a bit. And sometimes it's hard. You have to weather the storm for a period of time. But Ireland were just too soft there, and they were too soft for the try. And, like even the defence and the line, the Will Connors tackle on Baron de Merva, all that stuff, the desire, the character, it's all there. But it's just a collective aggression and will to get off the line together. And they've got to be way more vocal with that, pointing at the opposition and intimidating them. And we lacked that little bit at that period of time yesterday. You must remember, Ger, Johnny Gray was gone off, Scott Cummings was gone off, Jamie Ritchie was gone off. So 3 of the starting pack are gone off. Nick Henning came on. He had to go into the second row with Grant Gilchrist. And they had their sub-scrum half as a wing forward for that period of time. And they looked like the dominant team. Couple of decisions I questioned from Roman Pott. I thought Jordan Larmour was penalised for a turnover that was harsh. The free kick may be harsh off one scrum where there's a bit of crabbing going on across the field. But you've got to deal with those situations, and Ireland didn't deal with them. And it comes down to, Ryan Bair's enthusiasm to block down Ali Price, and then the reaction from him and Henderson to win the penalty. And then, Sexton I thought was brilliant yesterday, to be fair, in a game that was highly pressurised to get that kick. And look, we mentioned the negatives here. There's a lot of positives, and maybe we're being too hard on Ireland in a sense that, Scotland beat England. They should have beaten Wales. The sending off, killed them in that game. A lot of what I heard in the last couple of days is this is the best Scottish team in 20 years. We've heard issues around confidence and still question marks over the team, but we still won the game. And I think we deserve to win it. We made it very hard for ourselves in the last 15 minutes. So is the glass half full or half empty? I think it's half full. The worrying part for me is then when you look at some of the stats, and I look back at the 4 games, we've dominated possession and territory in all 4 games. Okay, we had up on, in the Ireland-Wales game, we defenders beaten 23. In the Ireland-France game, defenders beaten 23. In the Ireland-Italy game, defenders beaten 25. How many defenders did we beat yesterday, would you say, if you were to put a guess on it?
23? I haven't seen this now, so what was the figure?
6.
Ooh.
6. So that's something that really, and these are in games we've dominated. So it tells you that the defenders beaten up in the 20s, average at 20 per game in the first 3 games, is that we're putting variety, we're stepping guys, we're getting through the tackle, we're beating a defender with that first point of contact. We did that 6 times yesterday. So that was a kind of an alarming thing that jumped out at me. Now, in saying all that, I know what it's like in myself and people who've played at that level, and I'm not saying that you have to have played at that level to understand this. Scotland were incredibly aggressive. They were an absolute nuisance to play against. They were putting massive pressure defensively on Ireland. So it's hard at times. Ireland were trying to build phases and tempo. And I thought they did that really well at the start of the game and at the start of the second half. The try for Tadhg's try comes off a really good maul. They get a point of contact, build some phases, brilliant clean outs, and Tadhg storms over the line with a latch. And they scored a try. So I don't have any issue with that. It's very, very intelligent, direct rugby, and it hurt the opposition. It put Ireland in a great place. They get another penalty. So they put themselves in a great position, 24-10, and maybe a bit of panic or lack of confidence. They keep talking about, they're confident, they're in a really good place, small margins, and they've got to put a brave face in it. But maybe in the last 15 minutes of the game, that bit of lack of control and composure just deserted them. And look, the whole game was chaotic, Gerard.
Yeah,
the whole game was chaotic at times.
It's a Six Nations away game against a side who do have some confidence in terms of Scotland. And the Scottish rugby public that we spoke to, the Scottish rugby journalists, the ex-players, they were all relatively confident that things were going in the right direction and they could see some strength and depth for the first time and a consistency of performance. That's why, for me, the glass is definitely half full this morning. A clutch win brings a team together. If we'd gone on and won that game and Scotland hadn't made their comeback, there'd still be a little bit of doubt. But the coming through something like that can be a very positive experience for any team, particularly when the coaching ticket is essentially a new coaching ticket. I know several of them were there under the previous regime, but the previous regime is gone, and we need to stop comparing everything to the Joe Schmidt here. There's one more point I want to bring up about myself and Eoin we're debating about how much credit do Ireland get for the malfunction in the Scottish lineout. And I say you have to give the bulk of the credit to Ireland for inflicting that on Scotland, as opposed to saying, oh, Scotland just had a malfunction and therefore they had no chance of winning that game.
You have to give them credit because I think they showed Scotland space and opportunity where they should call the ball and throw it, and then they moved very late. Henderson, Ryan, Tadhg, I think the three of them are playing really well. And that's another point. I'll go back to the lineup in a second. Half the team are playing unbelievably well. Look at the performance of Henderson, Henshaw, Tadhg Furlong, Keith Earls yesterday. Sexton played really well. James Ryan was brilliant. Will Connors. There's players you can rattle off there to saying that they look like they're full of their flow is going from. They're playing well with the ball, without the ball. They're full of energy. Their fitness looks very good. They're having impacts in the game. And then there's probably 5 or 6 players who are just playing below par. Someone like Gary Ringrose is probably our most creative player, our most talented player, and he just doesn't look himself at the moment. But going back to the lineout, it's massive pressure they're putting on. And, you know, people may say I'm saying this because Paul O'Connell, I played with him and he's a friend of mine, but you can see his influence. They're the kind of things he did, and they're the kind of learnings that the team have taken forward. They could go out against England next Saturday, and sometimes it's on the day when you start putting doubt in the opposition hooker and the caller of the opposition and their line-out options. It can go wrong, and sometimes it's hard to fix that because you start trying to simplify it and say throw it to the front, and then James Ryan is right behind you slapping the ball out of your hand, or Henderson. So they got into the Scottish players' heads. They could go out against England next week and not steal one line out, and you know that's the way games go. Sometimes it can unravel for you, the line out. But you know, Scotland probably have themselves to blame. They were a bit lethargic, and they started throwing to the front for safety. Then they tried to back themselves and go to the tail, and James Ryan, Henderson, Byrne were pushing right back there. So Ireland were very intelligent in what they did. They showed space, then closed the space after the ball left the hooker's hands. And that's a big plus. The breakdown is another big plus. Their efficiency at the breakdown, you know, it's up into the high 90s. So, you know, there's a couple of balls that they turned over for sure. They had 10 turnovers yesterday, but the urgency and the efficiency and the technique that they're bringing to the breakdown is very, very impressive. And there was a lot of good ball to play off yesterday. But Scotland fanned right across the field, and I said it in commentary. There's a few times Ireland kicked the ball, Sexton put up Gary Owens or high balls, and he was probably right to. Because if Ireland see out that game, even if they kick the leather off the ball for the last 15 minutes and pressurise the opposition and win by 8 or 10 points, we don't look at it then and we don't say, well, where was the attack in the last 10 minutes? You've got to see out the game. But, you know, mentally, they've got to learn from it. And I think they will. That's a big win from yesterday. You know, Scotland, like I said, everyone I heard speaking about Scotland, they were predicting a Scottish win, and this is the best Scottish side in 20 years. We deserve to win that game, albeit, you know, we forced it with Ryan Baird and Henderson penalty right at the end.
What about James Gibson Park? There's been criticism of the amount of time that he kicked the ball, particularly in the last 3 or 4 minutes. Obviously, Keith Earls wins one of them, which is a sensational moment, because essentially that is the end of Scotland's ability to get an attacking platform. If they turn the ball over, it's in midfield, Earls gets it, and then the next kick takes them to the edge of their 22, and they never really get out of there. So they obviously backed themselves to use the box kick. We were told that we wouldn't see that much box kick from Gibson Park because he's not as good at it as Murray is, but he did go to it plenty. So it's still part of our armoury. Are we using it well, or are we still a little bit too reliant on it?
Too reliant on it at times. I think the accuracy of some of those kicks, it was a mixed bag for Jamison Gibson Park. Some of his box kicks weren't deep enough. They were going 8-10 yards. The ball was coming down in a crowd of players, of forwards and backs. A little bit more depth. He kicks some really good ones as well. At the end, I just wonder what were the Irish fans who were watching the game yesterday thinking? What were you feeling when he was kicking them away? I think the first one, okay, maybe there's three minutes to go, and then when we get into the 78th minute, he kicks it again, and you know, it was. I felt the same way. Stuff.
I felt the same way the Welsh fans must have felt when it was 79-57 on the clock, and they kicked the ball back to us, and we went the whole length of the field and should have won the game. I did feel like, wow, what are we doing?
There's a fear there that you'll give away a penalty and that you'll, go off your feet and stuff, and it's hard. It's quite predictable. We see most teams trying to see out the game with the pick and jam. Well, I thought they'd have been better off just to try and move the ball through the hands, and it's risky. Look, I prefer maybe to see a deeper kick and just get your defensive line, because when we put Scotland back in outside their 22, they've got to run it across the field, and eventually 9 times out of 10. You'll come up with a turnover or the opposition will knock the ball on, or they'll force it.
I think you made the point before half-time. Kick the ball out of touch, because their line-out is so bad that we've got a 50-50, if not better, chance of getting it back.
Yeah, and that sounds simple, but at times, take 10 yards off the length of your kick and just put it in the stand. I know this is a forward. It's simple. If you get a turnover, if you defend the opposition for a period of time, you turn it over, you get the ball back, give it back to your kicker. Just get 10, 15, 20 yards upfield. Okay, it's brilliant if you get 80 yards and it goes into touch and you're running up the field and you're kind of nudging the opposition going forward and you're screaming and shouting to your own players, you know, all sorts of stuff about they won't break us down, they're going nowhere, brilliant defence, Ireland, all that kind of stuff. They're energy kind of boosters, if you like. But if the ball goes up the field after you've given a period of time defending, getting up off the ground, you're physically kind of tired, you kick down to the opposition and they run back at you and they're attacking you again, you're kind of thinking, maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but I just felt this as a player. If you have to go attacking again, there's a real danger that maybe somebody might switch off, get a little bit tired, and they'll get over the game line or they'll find a bit of space. And I just think that game management stuff needs to be shrewder and sharper. When you do good stuff, just simplify, put it into the stand. And it isn't about even winning the line out or taking it off the opposition. It's about putting pressure on them, maybe forcing them to take it off the top, hit up midfield and knock them back. Someone come up with a big tackle. They're kind of big moments you can create. But look, it was far from a perfect performance, but a really, really important win. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. Maybe the pressure of just trying to get a win there against a good Scottish side. I even read somewhere in the paper this morning, Scotland were dreadful and really poor. We made them look poor at times, but before the game, this is the best Scottish side in 20 years. I heard that so many times. I read it in the papers. So I think we deserve to win it, but the last 15 minutes and some of the attack is a real concern.
On the evidence of Saturday evening, how big a beast are Ireland coming up against this weekend?
Well, I think they're probably, England were slow out of the traps, and a lot of that was down to the Saracens players and having very little rugby. It was an incredible game, England and France. I thought some of the attack out of the French was incredible, and England show, and they kick the ball so much again, England, but their kicking is very, very effective at times. They're big runners. Billy Vunipola looked a lot sharper. The character they showed and the quality they showed to get that win, Itoje getting that try in the 76th minute. I think France probably have known but to blame but themselves for not seeing out the game as well. And I think Jalabert, who was absolutely sensational, missed touch with a penalty. Well, he didn't put it in the stand. Johnny May hits it back in field, and that was the start of that surge back from England. There was a lot of mistakes. The first half was incredible, but Englanders they'll get so much confidence out of that game, and we go back to what we always say when we play England is the power game. We can manage against Wales and Scotland. That doesn't seem to be a concern or an issue, and that showed yesterday. Scotland didn't overpower us. That's the worry on Saturday, the physicality. And, if we make those kind of errors and mistakes, England will be a lot better again for that win and maybe the game under their belts again. They'll punish us more. But, maybe Ireland can get better and this win will do them the world of good. But they have to find a little bit more creativity and a little bit more accuracy in what they're trying to do and not give the ball back to the opposition so easily when they work incredibly hard for a period of time. So it's a pretty daunting task because I think England will be a lot better. But England have showed vulnerabilities, and if you keep the ball against them and if you push, their discipline was probably much better on Saturday, but if you hold on to the ball for long periods of time, they will give away penalties and they get a bit disjointed. So that's the challenge for Ireland. Can they bring a different tempo and an accuracy next Saturday? If
you look through, you mentioned some of the statistics actually from this campaign so far that Ireland have been quite good when you look at the main metrics, I guess. That was the case against England last year in the Nations Cup as well, Alan. Ireland had more possession, more territory, I think more metres gained, more defenders beaten. They had actually beaten England comprehensively in all those metrics and yet lost the game on the scoreboard comfortably. How did they turn the dial on that this week?
It's been more ruthless. You just cannot, if you get into good positions, you've got to execute and be ruthless and have a real mentality of that. Too often, we're looking at the game on and we're saying, oh, that's just another bad mistake, or that's a bad decision. He should have given a pass there, or he should have put the head down. And look, maybe we're being hard again here, and it's just making really good decisions in important moments in the games. And England, that, you know, we talk about their physicality and their power game, getting over the gain line. That's what they rely on. Ben Youngs kicks the leather off the ball. George Ford does. Farrell does. So they don't mess around too much in their own period, half of the field. They wear teams down with a relentless ruthlessness, if you like, when they get into the opposition, and they just seem to come away with a score. So if Ireland get into the opposition, England 22 next week, are they going to get a penalty or get a try or make that pressure count? And too often, like the work they're doing, they're working their socks off, which, you know, in fairness, you've got to give them credit for that. But they just need to be more intelligent and have more anticipation about what the ball carriers do. You know, if somebody gets their hands through, is there a possibility of an offload? And just put variety in that attack. It's the overall shape and the work rate of when the game breaks up a little bit, it's Ireland's accuracy and their shape right across the field. Would we have scored a try like France did on Saturday against England for the penalty try in the second half? It was incredible. You know, so we at times we're lacking some bit of spark in attack. But when we get into the opposition 22, we've got to be more ruthless. And you know, Ireland are trying to come up with little plays and strike plays and stuff like that. But too often, I think these things are breaking down now. When we saw under the Joe Schmidt era that the efficiency of maybe the clean out enabled the pace of the ruck to be really fast, or a line of running from a dummy runner held down the defensive player. If you look at the line from Vakatawa for that French try, Henry Slade bit right down on him. Jalabert wraps around with Dupont, and that's where the space is. And then under the bit of pressure, Jalabert doesn't panic. He kind of double pumps the ball and puts it over the top to Penno, which it's a simple finish in the end, but brilliant accuracy in the midfield with the lines of running. And again, that's an area that Ireland need to get better at.
Well, can I ask you then, very quickly, because we're out of time. So let's say they rest James Lowe next week, or they drop him, whatever, and whoever comes in. It probably would be Larmour, but maybe Stockdale is back after playing well at the weekend. Hard to know who to pick there. But is Ringrose safe?
There's a problem. Yeah, I have an issue with the midfield. I think Henshaw is playing so well, but it's still, a lot of it is punching hard. It's running down the middle. We're still lacking some bit of creativity or spark in that midfield. That sounds very critical because, as I said, Henshaw is an incredible athlete. He's a guy you'd love to play with because he's full of enthusiasm, aggression, energy, keeps showing up time after time to make carries. But the midfield just isn't right. And this has gone on for a number of years now. There's been a bit of chopping and change in Bundy Aki, Chris Farrell. You know, I maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, but, you know, Stockdale may come back in, but I don't think it's the craziest idea in the world to put Ringrose on the wing and bring Farrell or Aki into the centre, particularly against, you know, the powerful physical English side. There's no Manitou Langi there, of course, and Slade and Farrell don't have the same impact, but I don't know. Stockdale looked sharp when he played for Ulster, but again, there's defensive question marks there. Yeah. Do we pick solid defensive players next weekend who are going to fix the defence and be more aggressive coming forward, or do we go put in a Larmour and a Stockdale and try and have that bit of spark? But look, Gary Ringrose is a brilliant player, and I think I wouldn't be against the idea of playing him on the wing, because I think he's a player. If you give him the ball, he has that bit of magic in him. But maybe he can turn it around next week and have a big performance. You know, when we say he's not playing well, we were thinking of the try and that they score at the start and that kick. But he just looks a little bit hesitant at times in this championship, and that's a worry and a concern. So I'm not really sure at this stage who they'll pick. will they go with James Lowe again? One player who's a big loss to this team is Caelan Doris.
Yeah.
Because he's a natural footballer who you just think him running in midfield, he's the type of fellow who steps, he can accelerate through the tackle, he can attract two defenders. I don't think it was the right call taking Ty Burn off yesterday as well. I think Jack Cunningham did very well. But I think particularly when we're chasing the game, Burn is going to get you a turnover or something there. He's going to get in at the breakdown. And the decision not to bring Conor Murray on 65 minutes was a poor decision, I thought, because I think, we can criticise Conor for maybe not playing his best rugby in the last 18 months. He's played very well at times. And there's a lot of scrutiny on him and Sexton all the time because of their age profile and how long they've been around. But there's no doubt a guy like him coming on the field yesterday would have been really important, calming influence on that chaotic end to the game. So I thought that was a mistake as well. All
right, we got to leave it there. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
The inquests are always a little bit easier after the wins. 16 minutes past 8 this morning. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. We'll be back talking football with David Meyler next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
And I was looking to find out what England were complaining about. And I suggested that it might have been offside. And then I realised, for goodness sake, it was a mistake by the defender that played the ball to Shilton and Maradona. I said it was pure football genius. Because the contrast between the two moments, I mean, in one, he was absolutely a cheat, and the next moment, he was absolutely world class.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Get ready for the Cheltenham Festival with the Boyle Sports app, with a special offer guaranteed on every race, every day of the festival, plus extra places on each way bets over all 4 days. The Boyle Sports app has got you covered. Need to study up? Check out our Racing Post insights or watch our exclusive video previews with Cheltenham Gold Cup winning jockey Robbie Power. The Cheltenham Festival on the faster than ever Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie. 18 plus.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It's 18 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. A reminder to subscribe to the OTB AM podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we will be in your inbox before 10 o'clock every morning so you can catch the whole show. Now, let's turn our attention to the weekend's football. I'm delighted to say David Meyler is here with us. David, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning. How are we?
Yeah, good. There's loads of different places that we could start and lots of different stories to get stuck into. I kind of want to start in a slightly unusual place, in Leicester hammering Sheffield United, primarily because of your tweet yesterday where you talked about the quality of Tielemans as a midfielder and how ultimately you'd love to see him at Liverpool. What is it about him that has kind of clicked at this point in his career? Because he's still quite young in his Leicester career, and yet he's somebody who's nailed down a position as a first-choice starter for Roberto Martinez at Belgium. We're finally beginning to see him kind of emerge from the shadows at Leicester over the last couple of weeks.
No, do you know what, Ger? I wouldn't even say over the last few weeks. I think he's been one of them consistent players for the last few seasons. If you think about it, he's only 23 years of age. He's played in the Champions League in the past, and of course, like you said, he's a regular in the Belgian national squad. I just like the way he goes about his business. He's very tidy on the ball. He's very creative. He's kind of that bright spark. And then I think Maddison is the one who grabs the headlines, but Youri Tielemans is another one who obviously looks to get Vardy going, or in yesterday's case, Inacho. They're trying to get them in behind. And it's just the way he kind of keeps hold of the ball where he plays. Now, of course, whenever you put out a statement on Twitter or whatever, people hit me with he kind of blows up after 60 minutes. But I disagree, really. I think he's a wonderful, talented player, and like I said, he's only 23 years of age. He's only going to get better and better. And certainly, I would love to see him play with, one of the big teams, like, your Manchester Cities, your Liverpools, your Uniteds, Chelseas, who have a squad of unbelievable players. Leicester are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but like, to go on to that next level, I'd love to see how he do there. I definitely think he's a phenomenal player.
It does seem that if you pair him alongside, say, Fabinho in a Liverpool midfield, you would get a similar thing to what you're getting alongside Ndidi this season, which has been unbelievably effective for them.
Yeah, but I think that's the kind of the benefit for Tielemans is, I think a lot of people underestimate, like Wilfred Ndidi, how good he is. He knows his role to a T, in the sense that, like, he just breaks up play. He's very calm, just keeps it ticking over, and he's actually a very good passer of the ball. So he kind of allows Tielemans to be able to get on the ball, get forward. You do see Tielemans a lot of the time like peel into areas wide to kind of, in order for them, yesterday, Leicester obviously played with the three at the back with the wing backs, but he gets them to push higher and he can get into pockets of space. But they have a great little partnership. And certainly when the two of them play and you've Maddison, it is like, it's a bright, young midfield. Those three are very good players. And it'll be interesting to see if any of them do kick on the next couple of years. We've seen the success, say, of N'Golo Kante at Leicester when they were successful, to kind of go on to Chelsea and see the things he did there, and obviously with France. So it will be interesting the next year or two if they do move on to inverted commas a bigger club.
Who would he play with at Liverpool? Like, what would stick him in the Liverpool squad right now and pick that first choice midfield for me?
Well, I think the big thing, look, is there's this talk over Wijnaldum. I know he's come out recently and said that, he'd be devastated to leave Liverpool, of course. He's been phenomenal servant for the last few years. Obviously, the success they had in the Champions League and the Premier League, he was pivotal to all that. I think the way I was kind of looking at it would be he would be his replacement. Now, the only thing is that energy that, Gini does bring. But if you were to pick a Liverpool midfield three, for me, it would be Fabinho sitting as the whole midfielder. You'd have Henderson and Tielemans. Of course, then that's kind of if Wijnaldum moves on. Of course, then you've got Thiago, Curtis Jones. So it'd be a little bit of competition there. But I would love to see that midfield tried out anyway. Because I do think Tielemans is creative. He does have something. Of course, look, Thiago has that. Curtis Jones has that. There's been question marks over Jordan in that sense. I still think he is capable of being creative, but certainly it would be, I was looking at in the way if Gini was to move on, like that could be a good replacement. Of course, like I said, he's 23 years of age, and he's a lot of experience. He's played a lot of, big games. So, watch this space.
Yeah, like it's interesting that we kind of talk about who he could play alongside. Like, what does Tielemans do when you're James Maddison playing in front of him? And how does that play into maybe a little bit of a resurgence in the number 10? Because I think we've seen a lot this season about how the number 10 position is dead, but James Maddison is playing good football. Bruno Fernandes obviously is playing there. Odegaard has come into Arsenal and seems to have picked up positions akin to a number 10 as well over the last few weeks.
I think the thing I like most about Maddison is the arrogance and the kind of swagger he plays with. He's kind of like, he wants to be the main man. Every time you see him, he kind of wants to get in the half turn. He's looking to be the provider for Vardy. He wants to be the one that grabs the headlines. Of course, look, when Jamie Vardy scoring the goals, but he wants to be the one, that's playing the Hollywood passes. I don't think Tielemans is like that. I think he's just happy to go about his business. He just wants to, like, anytime I've seen him play, he's always kind of a 7 out of 10, and then you'll get a bit more here and there from him. But if he was to go on and kind of go to affect games more himself, that's when we could probably see him go on to another level. As you touched on, Bruno there is certainly that fella. I don't think there's enough adjectives in the dictionary to describe his, impact on United in the last, 14 months. He's just been incredible. Even like last night, you can just see whenever something good comes for United, it always goes through Bruno. And I think that's what Maddison tries to do. And certainly if Tielemans was to probably take it on a level and try and be as creative as those, I think he could be.
Leicester, this next few weeks of Leicester's season is going to define whether or not they qualify for the Champions League next year. You have to assume if they qualify for the Champions League, they'll be able to keep most of their best players next year. Traditionally, they've kind of tried to cash in on one of the players and use that money to reinvest, and they've been absolutely brilliant at reinvesting that money. Is there a chance that they could actually keep all their players and then add players if they were to become a Champions League team next season?
No, definitely. I think it's kind of when you look from the outside, you know, you look at Brendan, you know, you've got a manager there who plays good, attractive football. By all accounts, every day is enjoyable. They all want to go in and play for that manager. It's then like, is the grass always greener? You know, if you leave and you move on, of course, you look at probably, if you look at the team that were successful that won the Premier League, you had Mahrez, Kante moved on. Drinkwater was an example of someone who moved on who probably should have stayed. Of course, it probably financially benefited him, but it didn't work out in the long run at Chelsea. Then you have Harry Maguire, who's gone on to, you know, have success and go on, you know, captain Manchester United. So there is a case that some of them could say, like, well, if we don't make Champions League football and there's a Champions League team, you know, wants me, do I move on? And like you said, the reinvest money. I think certainly with the players they have, like Maddison is young. I know he's been linked with Manchester United in the past. You've Harvey Barnes. You know, Vardy, I think he'll play for another 10 years at Leicester. They seem to have this kind of core. And then, like, even if you look at the back line, they have a good mix of old and young with Fofana, Sayunchai, and then you have someone with the experience of Johnny Evans to help them. You know, they just have a nice balance in their squad overall. I don't think it'll be too difficult for them to retain the players, because I'd say it's, you know, it's like, look at them. They're up pushing, you know, the top four all last season. Of course, I know they fell away towards the end, but this season they're back up there again. So it just looks like a place as a feel-good factor. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, he kept hold of all of his players. But then, like you said, if he's looking at reinvesting, maybe bringing 2 or 3 players, does someone like Maddison move on for probably the best part of 70 or 80 million, then they look to reinvest that money. I think we'll just have to wait to really see when the summer comes.
They've got about 240 million from Drinkwater, Chilwell, Mahrez and Maguire since the end of 2018, that season. And I think their net's positive in terms of outgoings. They might have spent about 8 million maybe, or it's 8 million either way over that time. It's an incredible... It's an incredible success story in terms of the hit rate that they have of signing new players who come and replace seemingly impossible to replace players.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That just shows you that the manager and, I don't know, they say the club secretary, the owners, they're all on the same wavelength. You know, obviously these conversations are happening behind closed doors and they're identifying the right types of players and they're signing them. You know, it just looks like a good infrastructure, and they have a good balance that they're able to get this right. Of course, look, Chilwell was the name I forgot, even though I only interviewed him the other day. But like, he goes for 50 million, and then you'd kind of say, is he better off at Chelsea than he would be at Leicester? But then, you know, that's the thing. But at the same time, Leicester have just got it right. They just seem to identify these players. They pick them up, and then, you know, Brendan does his magic, and, you know, they go on and be successful for Leicester for 2-3 seasons, and then a big club then comes looking at them.
Yeah, James Justin signing from Luton Town. Not bad. I'm looking to see how much that actually costs. But, like, I mean, you're selling Chilwell, getting Justin in from a division below. Like, it's a pretty incredible stuff from them. Just, can we talk about the North London derby yesterday, David? Just to chat a little bit, first of all, here maybe about Tottenham. Because Jose Mourinho can set up shop and defend against the best of them when it comes to any team in European football. And you can sometimes forgive him for that mentality. Can you forgive him for the way he set up yesterday against a team who are 10th in the Premier League?
You see, on the way you say 10th in the Premier League, it's still Arsenal. You know, it's still, you know, your biggest rival. The game is going to be different. Like the way Arsenal probably played for the first 15 minutes, hour, you know, you wouldn't have put them as a 10th team. You know, the way they dominated possession, they were creating chances. Of course, look, Tottenham were always capable of catching him on the counter-attack. But I just, like, Mourinho fascinates me. Like, he comes out after and says, like, when we play the way we play, like, how can you, you know, we're not creative enough, how can you expect to win a game? You know, he's coming up with stuff like that. But then surely the message is coming from him to the players that, you know, we need to be solid, you know, be defensively solid, and then we can look to get forward at the right opportunities. like Tottenham were just, it was almost till Lamela got sent off. Then they kind of, when the shackles came off and they started to play and they started to create. And then, of course, look, Harry Kane had hit the post. I know it was a free kick, but they came at them. Harry Kane also had the goal where he was offside from the free kick with the header. It's just, they're just so, it's almost a throwback to kind of like his Chelsea team where they were so good at getting in front and then they would be so solid and hard to break down. But Tottenham now are going the other way where they're like hard to break down and then they're just looking to counter-attack. And eventually teams are going to get in. Somebody's going to make a mistake because we're all human. You know, it's very difficult to defend for large chunks of the game. And it frustrates me because Tottenham have some very good players. You know, they have the ability to get on the ball and make something happen and, you know, dominate teams possession-wise. Because then you see other games they play, like the Burnley, they come out. I know Burnley is not Arsenal, but they come out and they dictate the game to them. And I think yesterday they just left Arsenal have too much control that, you know, by the time Lamela was gone, and they kind of said, right, we need to try and get ourselves back into it. It's nearly too late because you've got the best part of 10 or 15 minutes to try and turn it around. And you don't have that much time. And, you know, Arsenal then are holding on. They're fighting to hold on to something. So it can be very difficult to, you know, break a team down like Tottenham. Or like Arsenal, sorry.
I just find it interesting, just especially given Mourinho's comments pre-match saying, I look up, I don't look down. If Arsenal was 7 points ahead of us, I would look to them. But because we have 7 points more than them, I don't look down. Like, if you're going to twist the knife and say Arsenal are like an inferior team to Tottenham, then you probably want to play like they're an inferior team to Tottenham.
Yeah, no. You just never know with Mourinho. It's nearly like we know with him, you know, from his time at Inter Milan to Real Madrid, there's always been the mind games. It was kind of like, yeah, he's trying to provoke the Arsenal players, but then it's backfired, hasn't it? Because now that gap has been cut to 4 points, and now Tottenham will be looking over their shoulders at Arsenal. Because if it turns out that Arsenal end up catching them and go above them, you know, obviously Mourinho was going into that after winning his last 2 games. He was on to be the first Tottenham manager to obviously beat Arsenal in his first 3 games. I think he'd be disappointed this morning in the way they approached the game. I think they could have done that a lot better, certainly with the players that they have. The form Gareth Bale's in, and of course the partnership between Son and Kane. Like, Harry Kane didn't touch the ball in Arsenal's box. Like, that's just phenomenal, really. Player who's known for his goals or whatever, he's not getting the touches in and around the box and that. It's just scary.
He made his mark on Gabriel, though. Bit of a late hit on him. In terms of the big talk about before the game yesterday, David, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang not being in the starting team. If you're looking at that from an Arsenal perspective, how big a risk, even before a ball is kicked, is that to leave one of your best players out for being late? Is it actually good management?
I think it is good management. It takes a lot of balls to do that. You know, like you said, you're going in. Like Mikel Arteta has lost his last 2 North London derbies. He was on to be the first ever Arsenal manager to lose his first 3. And you think about it, your captain turns up late to a team meeting, and it's obvious that, you know, Mikel has put in these fines or these punishments or whatever. And, you know, if your captain, what would the message been if he had, say, left him in the starting 11? I think it's, look, if you win, you're right. If you lose, you're wrong. He got it right yesterday. And even you could tell, like, he made substitutions through the game. And you're thinking, surely you're going to bring Aubameyang on at some stage. But he chose not to bring him on. I think it just kind of sets the tone that he was like, look, guys, I'm in charge. I don't care if you're my captain or if you're a young boy, who's broken into the first team. If you're late, you're late. I fully respect it. You know, obviously, timekeeping in football is massive. Certainly you don't want to be late for team meetings. You don't want to be, when you're, you know, the bus is leaving the hotel or whatever it may be, you just don't be late. And fair play to him, because obviously he said, like, if you were late, this is a possibility. And I believe it's not the first time Aubameyang has been late. So I think it's been an ongoing issue with them. And then, of course, there's the reports that once after the game had finished, there was players, you know, doing a warm-down session outside. So obviously the ones who don't play enough minutes will do runs or whatever. Aubameyang didn't do them. He drove away. So that'll be another concern. But look, Arteta will be clever enough. He's been around the block. he's dealt with big players from, his playing days. Of course, being at Manchester City with Pep, he'll be well used to dealing with these kinds of players. So I imagine
like
he'll be
you do
in house.
Mesut Ozil?
I think. I don't think it'll go to that extreme.
It shouldn't.
It'll be a wake-up call for Aubameyang, though. In the sense that, like, yes, you are captain, but you can't just have the free reign of turning up late, doing what you want. It would be a gentle reminder to him. And you think about it, Arteta made him captain. So you're kind of going against everything you've done. But I think, no, look, Aubameyang would have had the night to sleep on it. He'll probably go in this morning and, he'll address it and just say, look, I'm sorry. I imagine he'll be fined however much it is to pay the fine, and then they'll crack on as normal.
The speculation around the Celtic job is starting to focus on Roy Keane. Story in the back of the Sun yesterday that he's expressed an interest in it. What do you think is right for Celtic at this point? And is Keane, should he be in the mix for that gig?
100%. I think so, yeah. Of course, look, anyone who listens to me now will say, like, look, he's been out of management. Is it the best part of 10 years? So there's kind of saying, like, the whole Barstool fans, or Barstool managers, I should call them, will say, look, he's out of touch with the modern game. But definitely, Celtic have had a very disappointing year. You think of, obviously, you've won 9 in a row, you're on for 10. It's great. And, they believe their own hype. And then, obviously, Rangers were incredible the season they've had. But I think if Roy was to go in there, he brings that winning mentality. If you look at, the impact he had at Sunderland, say, because Celtic will be low, they'll be flat. Like Rangers have blown them out of the water this year, which was unheard of. I'd love to see Roy take over Celtic. I think he would turn them around next season, and I think they would be challenging, and I think they'd beat Rangers.
So Roy's the man to get them back to the top. Then you're backing him to get the job done, not only to take over, but to get him back to the top.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
How big? Sorry, go on.
Like, obviously, the thing is, Roy has a certain mentality of he's so used to winning, and he has that drive, and that is Celtic. Celtic is, I think it's a good fit in the sense that Celtic are used to winning. They don't like losing to Rangers. It's not like, in the Premier League where, if you look over the last 10 years, you've had like Liverpool, Leicester, Manchester City. Of course, Manchester City have probably dominated. I think this is their 5th league title in the best part of 10 years. So, like, okay, they've had that great success, but in the sense of Celtic are used to winning all the time. Whether it be, you look at Brendan doing the trebles, you look at Neil Lennon doing a treble. I think Roy has that winning mentality. He has that hunger. And I think if he was to take over, he would, it would quickly iron out a few problems that have, carried on or dragged out through this season. And I definitely would expect them to win the Scottish League title next season.
What sort of problem is Roy Keane good at fixing, David? Because on the outside looking in, it seems that if a team is lacking in motivation, that if they have the quality but perhaps don't have the attitude, he might be able to fix that. Is that a correct perception, or is he actually better tactically than we all give him credit for?
He's better tactically than you give him credit for. There's always this thing that kind of all the ones, people say they're dinosaurs, they don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. But most managers played the game, they understand it, they've gone through the eras where things have changed. You look at Roy Hodgson, he's still, of course, he's stuck with his 4-4-2, but he's adapted and changed for, God knows how many times. There's no doubting that Roy could go in and he'd give the place a lift. Of course, it's been Celtic fans, would be frustrated seeing all the, the Rangers celebrations, the way they've carried on, and the reminder that it's their 55th league title. I definitely think he'd go in and he'd be, he is tactically aware. He knows the game inside out. Watches, look, sure, we see him every weekend on Sky Sports. He'd bring that hard work, that drive, the success back to players. And I know he's itching to get back into management. I definitely think it's a good fit all around for both parties. It's just whether or not it happens.
One last thing for you. Shane on WhatsApp says, Ger, can you ask David if he reckons Harry Kane gets away with more from referees and pundits in the UK? Not the first time this season that he pulled that trick and could have seriously injured Gabriel. He's never called out for it.
No, he's not. He does get away with stuff, 100%. But then you don't associate Harry Kane with being a nasty player, do you? There's only those little clippets of, when a ball is played long and he's backing into defenders and they go flying over him. That's very dangerous. Of course, then he'll fight his case saying, well, I'm trying to be strong and take the ball down. Certainly, like yesterday, the one on Gabriel that's naughty. Of course he's going to get away with things. He's England captain, isn't he?
Well, that was the question. Sorry. I mean...
Yeah. Of course he does, yeah. Well, he's not... But it's not as if... How often do we see Harry Kane do something outrageous like that Gabriel, shoulder barge, kind of forearm barge yesterday? We don't... It's not part of Harry's game. That was pure frustration for him in the sense of the way that, Arsenal were dictating the play to him. He wasn't involved in the game. You got to think, like, that would have hurt him. He would have been angry inside. So he's left a bit on someone. But he definitely, I don't think it's purposely like that a referee is going out saying like, oh, Harry Kane is playing today, I'm going to leave him get away with things.
But the England captain does get away with stuff. I mean, younger viewers may be unfamiliar with Alan Shearer and Neil Lennon, where Neil Lennon has his head kicked in, essentially, and Alan Shearer effectively gets away with it. This is just before the 1998 World Cup. So there's a long tradition of the England captain essentially having, free reign.
Oh yeah, he'll get the rub of the green on certain decisions. Yeah, of course he will. That's just... I want to keep everyone on side, don't they? Of course.
He's the English Diego Costa is all I'm hearing.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Diego was unique, I think Diego would fight with the mirror.
David, good
I don't
stuff.
think Harry Kane's like Diego. Right.
Good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
David Meyler giving us some thoughts about the weekend's football. It was a good question as well about Harry Kane coming in on WhatsApp. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. It's 8:42. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We've had a load of comments. We're going to get to some of them now. On the football, that's the story. Aubameyang, not that they won. Arsenal won, Ger, says Peter G. Yeah, I know, but it's always a story when you drop your captain who arrives late in his chrome car. And I mean, do you think Tom Brady would be late if he was stuck in traffic? They would have sent out for a police escort. Why didn't Arsenal just organise a police escort for him? Send 2 motorbike outriders to pick him up? Like, what's the story, Eoin?
I don't know. The car does look suspiciously like a Batmobile. I don't know why he didn't convert it into the motorbike thing from the Dark Knight and just speed around the traffic and actually just arrive at the Emirates. We expect a lot from our footballers, and maybe they should be giving us that back. That commenter is right. I mean, this is Arsenal's day, and their captain has spoiled the party. Aubameyang has walked on into a great day for Arsenal Football Club, and unfortunately made the story about him.
The internet sleuthing is ongoing to see whether or not he did actually do the warm downs or not, because apparently there was one internet rumour early on that the players on the pitch could hear the revving of the supercar outside, the angry revving of the chrome supercar that had caused so much difficulty. But there is also some internet sleuthing going on suggesting that he was actually there. So it couldn't have been him doing the angry revving. Would you angrily rev the car on the way home if you were the captain? Remember that you're the highest paid player. Is there a time for just taking your medicine?
Yeah, this is the time to take your medicine. The Mesut Ozil comparison is a worrying one for sure. If you want to really take this to its end conclusion, it's not going to reach that point. The thing is, Mikel Arteta, what the Ozil situation shows is that Mikel Arteta can be unbelievably ruthless. Mesut Ozil was a teammate of Mikel Arteta. You would have thought that he would have been the one player that he kind of looked after and put an arm around when he came into the club, but not so. We've seen it with the William Saliba situation, that Arteta is ruthless when it comes to younger players. He doesn't really do sentiment that much. I think he might have picked up a little bit of Guardiola ruthlessness along the way. And if Aubameyang sulks and doesn't take this as a bit of a lesson, then he's not going to play for Arsenal this midweek, and he's not going to play for Arsenal next weekend. It'll be a bigger problem for him. So he'd like to think that Arteta will win this, and that Mikel Arteta, or that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang will allow Mikel Arteta to win this particular argument and just build a bridge and be fine for Thursday night.
All right. Well, look, the tree that doesn't bend will break. That's the other side of this. Coming up to 8:45, 8:44 this morning. Plenty still to come. We're going to hear from Nathan just before 9 to talk about golf, and we've got the performance rankings coming up as well. But right now, though, let's hear from Brian Kerr and first Kenny Cunningham about the North London derby.
Tottenham now, I suppose, have a bit of an... Well, Jose Mourinho, when he analysed this game afterwards, he speaks to the media, he'll have a bit of an out, really, because Lamela gets sent off, so he plays with 10 men. He can kind of use that as a bit of an excuse. And as you say, he'll probably be a little bit happier the fact that his team still went at it for that last 10 minutes, came close maybe to getting an equaliser. Harry Kane came off the post.
Yeah.
So considering they've won their last 5 matches, there's been a lot of question marks over the opposition they were facing. So I suppose his general feeling now after that game, Jose Mourinho, what do you think it'll be?
I think he'd be maybe quite bullish, maybe look the old deflection tactics in terms of, we spoke about maybe the penalty, and you're right, probably talk up the character of his players, how they kind of finish the game. But I don't think he can finger point, he can mark Lamela sending off as an excuse in terms of how his team performed up to that point. I didn't think it was good enough. A number of his players just off the pace. Bale couldn't get into the game. So no real combination play between the front four that we've seen in previous weeks. Kane some was off the pitch obviously, but Mora in those wide areas never really combined to any great effect during the course of the game. They kind of huffed and puffed a little bit. I looked a bit leggy as well. Bele looked a little bit out of sorts in that central area. The two full backs who's probably best traitor in attacking areas of the pitch, Matt in particular getting forward, and Reguilon never really saw them in those advanced areas, probably because they never retained possession of the football, Stephen. So yeah, I think it'd be very easy for Mourinho to come out. I'm sure he will. He'll be shouting and screaming and throwing his prams out of his toys out of pram, in terms of the penalty, and I'm sure he'll reference the red card, though I think it was warranted. But I think overall he'll be a little bit disappointed. I must admit I was a bit disappointed myself. I think there was an argument to be made before the game in terms of Tottenham chasing down potentially Chelsea and Leicester for a Champions League spot. But off the back of that performance today, I think some people might have to change the perspective and look at that Tottenham team and say, so yeah, there is undoubted quality within that team, but in terms of mounting a challenge for the top 4 between now and the end of the season, probably might be a little bit short.
So you don't think they will make the top 4? You think there are better sides ahead of them there, the likes of Leicester, Man U?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah, West Ham. Yeah.
No, I think the top 4 at the moment are going to take some dislodging. I don't think anybody will. I think that's the way it'll finish, the top 4. I don't see a massive, although Leicester have been a little bit sketchy of late, don't see a massive drop off for them this season that we saw last year. I think Man United will maintain not so much their form, but results in terms of kind of squeezing out enough wins between now and the end of the season. And Chelsea, I think, probably are the form team of those teams up there. And Liverpool, of course, are more than capable of making a charge. Don't get me wrong, I was focusing on Tottenham there. Liverpool are probably the only team maybe capable of putting 5, 6, 7 wins together. So they're the only team really realistically who can maybe break into that top 4.
Well, then it leaves the Europa League and the League Cup then for Mourinho's team. And look, when Manchester City are fighting at all 4 fronts, you wouldn't put it past a Mourinho team to beat them in that League Cup final. But looking at the Europa League, because that's their passage into the Champions League, if they can win it, I'm sure there's better sides in Europe than they are facing at the moment. Dinamo Zagreb, who will be looking at that game against Arsenal today, and we'll see that if you get around the back of that Tottenham defence, if you can get crosses in from the byline, you can beat them.
Yeah, absolutely. But Mourinho will know that as well. I think he kind of knows the small frailties within the team. We spoke about it today in terms of that central midfield axis of Højbjerg and Ndombele, 2 different type of players. For me, Tottenham always look more defensively secure with kind of Sissoko and Højbjerg in those central midfield positions. You can then take your pick of Ndombele or Mora or Bale in that number 10 position in front. That's when I think Spurs are the most effective, because I think defensively they're more solid, and I still think they carry that attacking threat. They have enough creative players on the pitch. So I think when he reverts to that kind of formation, which you might well do in the final against Manchester City, I think Spurs have the team to actually go and turn over Manchester City. They have the kind of game plan, the balance of the team to sit deep, low block, soak up pressure and actually hit teams on the counter-attack, which is probably what you're going to have to do against Manchester City. And in terms of Zagreb, I just don't think that Zagreb team is good enough to maybe find 2 or 3 goals against Spurs next week and keep a clean sheet as well. So I think Spurs will be fine in that respect.
And then looking at Arsenal, there, look, obviously in their position in the league now, just consolidating a top half finish. But supporters looking at that team again today might be a little concerned about the back as I said to you during the commentary, he does seem to tinker around with his back four maybe a little bit more than he should. I understand there has been injuries, but like for the likes of Manchester City, he left out David Luiz out of that game. He left out, I think it was Rob Holding who's been playing, or actually Rob Holding started that game. He brought in Pablo Mari, very inexperienced. So it just seems that, you know, as you know, Kenny, you need to start off the back with a good team. You need to build a good defence, have a good goalkeeper there as well. But he just seems to be tinkering around that very important part of his team.
But I think he's thinking around because he really hasn't got any kind of, not outstanding centre half, but a partnership there. So that's the case. You haven't got that quality in that area of the pitch anywhere around the club. You got some decent players there. David Luiz, we know his qualities, can switch off defensively, can be exposed, but a good leader, good personality, that type of thing. Gabriel looks to have a decent all-round game, but he hasn't set the world on fire. Rob Holding steady enough. Marty has some good moments. So look at all those players to see where's the outstanding partnership. It's just not there. You may have to look at the transfer market, but I really wouldn't be too downbeat talking about this Arsenal team. I can't stay downbeat for too long, because when you start looking up the pitch in terms of the quality that they have up the pitch, well, that's when you really start to get excited. I mean, Smith Rowe, the strides he's made this season, what a talent this kid is. And I'm not talking 2 or 3 years down the road. I'm talking now, the quality performance that he's putting in right now. Saka as well, 19, 20 years of age. The level that they're playing, absolutely outstanding. Odegaard may or may not be there. He's on loan at the moment. That may be made permanent. But even Martinelli, we're not even mentioning. Absolutely outstanding young player as well. Joe Willock, who's caught the eye. He's out on loan at Newcastle. He may come back into the equation. Nketiah, Pepe, we haven't even spoken about. We know the money they spent on him, and there's a talent there as well. So Aubameyang, like I said, naturally we haven't even mentioned as well. So the variation, not just the variation, but the attacking quality which they have higher up the pitch was only going to get better in terms of development of those younger players. That must give Arsenal supporters huge optimism in terms of what's coming down the road. But of course they need to get it right down the other end of the pitch. Again, I'd look at that central midfield access. Is that exactly how you want it? Xhaka and Partey, is that good enough? So I think once he can get those areas of the pitch right, and obviously today central midfield and central defence, but he can, if he needs to get players out, get players off the wage, but wherever he has to do to free up a bit of funds and get some real quality into those areas of the pitch, then I can see a big upturn in Arsenal's fortunes, because they're as good as anybody across that attacking line in terms of the players and the young talent in particular that they can put on the pitch.
It's Sheffield United's biggest defeat of the season, the biggest defeat since they came up to the Premier League, and Chris Wilder isn't in the dugout. As professionals, are you surprised by that performance that they put in today?
Not hugely. I think Chris Wilder was doing his best to keep a lid on how bad things were in the background. Obviously, he was trying to keep morale up among the players, given that you knew by his interviews that he was holding back and saying what he really wanted to say, which is that he feels that he was let down by the board and by the owner, and that he understood. He knew that they needed investment in the team. He wanted them to sign some players on loan in January. He didn't sign them. He wanted them to sign other players in the summer. And his understanding and experience of the game would have told him that the team wasn't good enough to sustain the levels of energy and to produce the results they did last year with the same squad was unrealistic. They had to get a goalkeeper because Henderson was going back. Remember, he was the one that got Henderson in the first place, and this is what the club seemed to have forgotten, that he was the one that built the team over the last few years. Yes, they had to support him in the transfer market, but he wasn't one that spent big to get the players they wanted. They invested in players who were at a lower level and gradually built a team that were good enough, and he brought the majority of those players played through the divisions for him. So the investment in Brewster and Berg were good investments. Brewster hasn't produced the results. McBurney hasn't produced results as yet. Ramsdale has done all right. He's a young goalkeeper with lots of potential. Had a great season with Bournemouth last year, and everybody thought he did well. His options to sign another goalkeeper more experienced might have been quite limited, but yeah, I think most people with any common sense in the game, looking at what Chris Wilder has done for Sheffield United, would say overall he's done a great job. They're going to go back down. Norwich went back down. They show what can be done. You stick with the manager, let him make the decisions about the squad and go on from there. But Sheffield United, it seems, wanted to put in somebody who was going to be a director of football type, who might have been making decisions about the sort of players that were needed. He didn't want to have that. and ultimately he's the one that goes, and I think they're the ones that are going to suffer as a result of him going, because it won't be easy to replicate what he's done when they do go back down.
He is one of the many names, Chris Wilder, who's been put in the running for the Celtic job. And there's a story on the back page of The Sun today that Roy Keane has expressed an interest in a job that I think he turned down maybe 5-6 years ago at this rate. Can you see Keane going back in? It's obviously a decade now since he was last a manager. He had a long spell with the Republic of Ireland as assistant manager. If you're in charge of Celtic and it's a Chris Wilder, Eddie Howe with plenty of recent experience against Roy Keane with not many, how do you balance that decision? What is it that puts Roy on a level where he can be in contention?
Well, I'm not sure what puts him in contention, but what would put him behind the others that you have mentioned, in my opinion, would be their recent record. Roy's recent record as a manager is a few years back at Ipswich, where it didn't end very well. There was heavy investment in Ipswich initially for Marcus Evans, but ultimately it failed, and they remained very much a mid-table team while Roy was there. So, you know, since then he hasn't taken the job. He's been assistant manager with Ireland with Martin. That didn't end very well for either of them. I don't think that time enhanced Roy's reputation as regards a club job, but you know, interestingly, I don't think English clubs take an awful lot of notice of how a manager does managing the Republic of Ireland. I mean, it didn't make an awful lot of difference to Mick McCarthy, you know, when Mick came in. But when you look at Mick's results, they weren't bad. I think it was 5 wins and 4 draws and 1 defeat in 10 games. So that wouldn't have put clubs off taking Mick. If you look at what he did in Cyprus, but it doesn't affect him. Didn't affect him, and now he's doing a great job. So go back to Roy. Is he in contention for Celtic? We don't know. They're not saying who's in contention for the job or who they're going to appoint. But I would think at this stage that if Chris Wilder was interested in it, he would be a much more he'd be a candidate that would be higher up the line, I would think, than Roy at the moment. You mentioned Eddie Howe. He's another one. I would think. What would that be based on? Well, his work at Bournemouth over so many years. He went to Burnley for a short period, didn't go well, went back to Bournemouth, did a tremendous job there. Obviously didn't go well last season. They went down a bit like Chris Wilder, only his time at Bournemouth was more consistent, and it was a longer period of time, and the style of football was easy on people's eye. But, you know, if Roy was to get the job, I'm sure he'd get stuck into it. He'd have every chance of being successful. He now has to compete with Rangers, who are at a different level than they've been for a long number of years. Stephen Gerrard has done a brilliant job there. And so Rangers would be a real competitor for Celtic now. They've got the League One this season already. Celtic have had the glory run of 9 in a row, so Roy will be going into a different situation where Celtic aren't at a good time in their history. So that's not a bad time to be coming in when it hasn't been successful, rather than coming in and following a manager that has been successful. But I don't know how that one's going to go.
OTB AM.
Okay, it's 8:58 this morning. You're listening to, watching, or however you are consuming OTB AM, and we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number. As you must know by now, the world's greatest golf podcast, Golf Weekly, has made the move to Patreon. When you sign up, you're guaranteed a podcast every Thursday with extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year and interviews with golf's biggest names as well. You'll also become an official friend of the pod. You'll be able to chat to the lads, Joe, Nathan, Peter and Fiona on our Discord channel, which, by the way, is lit. You'll get invites to our golf days whenever we can all get back out there, and there'll be exclusive watch parties around the majors. Get on to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now for $3.99 per month, or just search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now. That's less than €1 a week. And Nathan is here to give us all the tepid takes that he you know, this is the low rent, the free version that you're going to give us here. It was okay.
The focus group.
I'll tell you, that Discord channel has been lit over the weekend. At one stage last night, there was a drinking game going on around the Sky commentary. There are many of the friends of the pod arranging meetups for when the golf courses reopen. And I'm a little bit concerned that in a couple of weeks' time, when the government make the decision about when golf can restart in this country, that if they say it can't restart, that if there's a riot on Grafton Street, there'll be a line at the end of the RTE News that it all started out on this little Discord community. Not much was known about it, of this secret community, but that, the old friends of the pod on Discord may have started it all. They're quite passionate over there, to put it mildly, but it's been brilliant over the past 4 or 5 weeks. The response and the engagement at about 11:30 on Friday night when Rory McIlroy missed the cut. He obviously made some very interesting remarks about Bryson DeChambeau. I looked on Discord and within 5 minutes, there's about 100 people commenting on it. So we're all sort of doing the same thing, sitting on the couch for the weekend watching Sky Sports.
It's the homemade friend of the pod signs on cardboards that you want to watch out for at all of the future rallies.
Exactly. Dear God, it's like, Joe Malloy's head marching down Grafton Street. He is our leader.
Okay, let's move on. Shane Lowry found a bit of form?
Yeah, he needed it as well. Last week at Bay Hill, his putting was almost probably at an all-time low. His stats were pretty horrific, but this week he got it back. Thursday got himself into a bit of contention. Friday he said he had the same old problems with the putter, but played really well over the weekend. At one stage last night, he got to 9 under par. He was within 2 shots of the lead heading into the back 9, and a lot of scoreable holes early in that back 9. Didn't take advantage out of them. Probably ran out of a little bit of steam, but he finished in a tie for 8th. His putting was vastly improved over the past 4 days, and that is his best finish of the season so far. It's only the second time in the last year he's had a top 10, so it's been a struggle. He's living over in America. He's committed to spending a lot of time there at the moment. There's obviously a lot of travel issues at the moment, so his family are gone over as well. So this is a tough time. There's a lot of golf being played. He's away from the family quite a bit, and he hasn't looked particularly happy on the course over the last few weeks, but looked a different man last night in particular on that front nine when he got a bit of momentum going, and at the right time as well, because if his putter's hot, bearing out the stats at Arnie's place last week, from tee to green, he was as good as anybody. He was right up there, but it was just on the greens. He couldn't get anything flowing. And he's had those problems throughout his career with the putter of getting any sort of consistency. But we know with Lowry, he can perform at the biggest events. Like, it's incredible that he's won an Open Championship, a World Golf Championship, his home championship as an amateur. And there he is again contending at the Players. So it often feels like the bigger the occasion, the better Lowry performs. And we're within a month of the Masters, so it's a very good time to find a bit of form. He's heading to Augusta National this morning. What a life these guys lead. He himself and Neil Manship are going up alongside Lee Westwood and Lee's young son Sam for a couple of practice rounds. They were invited up by a member. Even as the Open champion, you need to be invited by a member of Augusta National. So they're going up there for a couple of days practice. Neil Manship has never played Augusta, so Sheahan is treating him for a couple of days, and a month out, it's the ideal preparation. But he's back then playing at the Honda Classic next week. It's a tournament and a venue where he lives just a couple of miles from in Florida. So don't be surprised if he backs it up next weekend.
Is this the Florida swing starting now, or is it everything?
No, we're well into the Florida swing now. We're a couple of weeks into the 4 weeks into the Florida swing at this stage. So yeah, he's at home. He can stay at home. He has the family close by. So that is something that's very important to Shane and his mindset. So he looks particularly happy at the moment. And the golf has been good for really since it restarted in July. Just week after week, it's been relentless in terms of drama, in terms of quality, in terms of brilliance of the winners. And it was just an added bonus then of Lowry in the mix last night.
That's interesting, because I think one of the reasons why it's been good is that there are now officially so many characters that the whole sport isn't being suppressed by the one superstar that has been there for so long and hanging over it. That actually, because Tiger has been gone for so long and then made his comeback, but is clearly not going to be a factor on tour essentially ever again, it looks like at this stage, that so many characters have been forced to stand up. So this weekend, for example, was supposed to be yesterday was supposed to be Bryson versus Westwood, but in the end, there was somebody coming from outside that duo to win the tournament, who has had his own dramas, and it's been it's fair to say a roller coaster period for Justin Thomas.
It has, and he's brought most of that on himself. Coming into 2021, he was there alongside Dustin Johnson in contention for being the best player in the world. He was on this ridiculous run, 7 top 12s in a row. He turns up at Hawaii again, performs well, but makes this inexplicable homophobic remark when he missed the putt, and straight away it was lashed upon rightly. His sponsors, Ralph Lauren, dropped him. He had a lot of explaining to do. He owned it straight away. He apologised. He talked about the learnings that he was going to take. But his form fell off a cliff over the couple of months since then, had done nothing until this week. But Justin Thomas yesterday, all weekend, his ball striking was unbelievable at a different level to everybody else. Couldn't hold a putt for a good chunk of that. But then about the 8th hole yesterday, it all finally clicked into gear, and he went through a stretch from 8 to 12 where he was 5 under for 4 holes, an eagle at 11. And he sort of cruised towards the finish. It's a very difficult final few holes at Sawgrass for players to try and play catch up, and he had the momentum. On 18, he stood up and there's water all down the left-hand side. I was listening to Brad Faxon last week talk about the tee shot on 18, which he feels is the most difficult on tour because you're basically standing on the water. It is everywhere you look. And he hit it right down the left-hand side, about 2 yards in from going into the water. And it didn't bounce to the left as it was spinning back there. It bounced straight on and ran on for about another 50 yards. So he had his little bit of luck to hold off DeChambeau and Westwood. But Thomas is in that mix now. Probably Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, and Justin Thomas are the 3 best players in the world right now and are contending week after week. And Thomas is just the one major so far. It's almost 4 years ago at this stage at the PGA. But he is the type of character you feel is going to be around for a long time. He's 27, but comes from a real golfing background. His father was a PGA Tour pro. His grandfather, who only passed away a couple of weeks ago, and he was very emotional about that last night, was also a PGA Tour pro. He's somebody you could expect to be at the very top, probably well into his late 30s, early 40s. So I'd expect Justin Thomas to go and win a major probably this season and win several of them over the next couple of years because he was just brilliant last night.
What was the crack with Westwood?
He admitted himself he ran out of a bit of steam. He's 47, contending 2 weeks in a row, that the legs felt a little bit like jelly at times and the back 9 yesterday. But he's just been so enjoyable to watch. On Saturday night, I remarked that I haven't seen anybody in the midst of playing their sport who's looked as happy as Lee Westwood. He looks like a man who's very grateful for being given this opportunity again at a stage of his career where a lot of his friends are dropping off the radar, that he's still there 2 Sundays in a row in the final group. Last week on 18, he found a divot off the tee and he just had this almost peculiar smirk on his face the entire time where you could see the psychologists and the psychology working, that he had to stay positive. He has his fiancée Helen on the bag, which is obviously quite unusual, but she seems to bring a certain calm to him as well. The one thing over the 2 Sundays is that it never looked as though he could go and grab the tournament by the balls. It never looked as though he could really go and just put together a string of 3 or 4 birdies that would take him away from the field. He was always just hanging in there. And that was the case again yesterday. He on 16 on the par 5, just hit a couple of really poor shots, went bunker to bunker. It was a hole that Bryson DeChambeau, who he was playing with, ended up eagling. DeChambeau was a couple of shots further back, so he left it a little bit too late, DeChambeau. But Westwood at 47, to have this sort of resurgence, remember he's a former world number 1, but he's never won a major. And something I think to keep a real eye out for over the next couple of years is a record in golf around the oldest major winner. It's held by an American, Julius Boros, 48 years of age. That was during the 60s. It's remarkable that with all of the advances in modern science, that we haven't had somebody beat that record yet. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if that goes over the next couple of years, whether it's a Westwood or Harrington sneaking another one or Phil Mickelson turning up at the Masters and delivering again, that there's no reason why a lot of these older guys can still contend, despite, as you touched on there, this just avalanche of young talent that seems to be emerging week after week. And you're right, it's brilliant to see the likes of Thomas DeChambeau, McIlroy still in the mix, because for a long time, and well, listen, how quickly we forget that great line of, Tiger didn't move the needle in golf. Tiger was the needle in golf. And if Tiger was to ever return, we would see that. But they are facing a short, medium-term future at the very least without Tiger Woods. And these guys are stepping up to the plate. Now, the television viewing figures suggest that Tiger is still the needle. That while it's as exciting as ever in America,
Tiger bin in contention transforms any tournament.
Yeah, of course.
And that's never going to come back.
Well, no, but that might just have been that doesn't mean that golf isn't still a massive, massive sport. Like, I was just looking there at how much Lee Westwood got 1.6 million for finishing second.
There's a brilliant video last night. Justin Thomas won 2.7 million last night, and his caddy Jimmy Johnson's in the scoring hut, and they obviously have a sheet of paper on a table beside him that has the full rundown of prize money, and he just takes a quick look and sees the 2.7 million and he goes, oh yes, if he gets the average 10%, that's a cool 270 grand there for Jimmy.
There's probably some kind of bonus as well, is there, for the big tournaments?
There is, and I think the caddy relationship for those top players is slightly different in that they would be probably on a set retainer or maybe on a slightly lower percentage at times. But you're right, then for the bigger tournaments, it may well go back up to the 10-15%. But for the viewing figures, for everything, golf in terms of a corporate beast is showing no signs of slowing down at all. The prize money has held up, if not increased every year. They're coming up with new innovations to add more and more money. And we see that. That is a driving force for so many players. The Olympics are on this year. Dustin Johnson, world number one, says, I'm not going.
Right.
It's around the FedEx Cup, and that's my priority.
Yeah, and look, I think the advent of gambling in all of the states in America is also going to see most sports get an injection of cash as they look for their share of the billions and billions that's going to be slushing around. So very quickly, was there anything about Bryson that we wanted to say and why he didn't win, how he fell off?
He just never got going yesterday at all. As I say, he hit on the fourth hole at this ridiculous shank that seemed to travel about 50 yards straight down the middle of the fairway, almost an air shot, and never recovered from the embarrassment and humiliation. Ended up holding a really good putt for a double bogey, and that left him trailing and always found himself 3-4 shots behind Thomas. But he has shown again that he can do it in pretty much any course. It suits Bryson that everybody is obsessing with the distance and the power. He is a brilliant putter, particularly under pressure. He played a lot of smarter, more sensible shots, it felt, over the weekend. He has this little Tiger-style stinger at times that he can pull out. He used a lot of irons off the tee, even on par fives. So maybe we're going to see a more rounded Bryson over the coming months, particularly heading to Augusta, where he sort of put himself out of contention within 3 or 4 holes back in the Masters in November. I think Bryson is maturing into a top-quality, top 3 player, which he is in the world. Had an eagle on 16, like almost a tap-in eagle on 16 to give himself a chance going into the final 2 holes. So every part of the game that you need, Bryson DeChambeau has, and I think it suits him that we all obsess and just focus on the power, because there's a whole lot more going on with Bryson DeChambeau aside from that.
I think Lee Westwood took his career earnings to 23 million on the PGA Tour alone this weekend. I think there's another 39. I don't know if the 39 is a global one that the European Tour have in their stats, but it's been an amazing career that Lee Westwood has put together.
When he'll be back playing Ryder Cup, you would expect this year. It's a quarter of a century at the very, very top of his game. And he's had some big dips in there where he's dropped out of the top 100, top 200 of the world, and has always brought himself back again and again. And having his fiancée Helen on the bag seems to have made a huge difference. She's a personal trainer. He looks for a 47-year-old Ger, he looks in sensational shape.
Right.
And there's a glow off Lee Westwood. There's a glow around Lee Westwood right now. And it's interesting you talk about those PGA Tour stats. He's won twice on the PGA Tour. Like, he's had the most unbelievably successful European Tour career. But when you're watching the PGA Tour coverage, they rarely acknowledge that the European Tour even exists. That any of that stuff happened for Lee Westwood. But he was a vice captain a couple of years ago in Paris for the Ryder Cup. He's going to be on the team this time. Yeah, and look, clearly a captain whenever he wants that gig as well. You've got to tune into Golf Weekly to hear the Rory takes and see what the crack is with that. I do want to ask you about football, Nathan, and the fact that Ireland have no fit footballers left at this stage. I heard you talking yesterday after the game to Brian Kerr, pointing out that you've some experiences. No experience of this. I had loads of experienced goalkeepers. Anytime I wanted one, I had an experienced goalkeeper, and it's not just in goals. It's central defence, it's central midfield, and it's our striking options, all decimated. They are, but he still has a lot of options. They're just not the options he would have wanted. So in goal, Caoimhín Kelleher, I was looking at some photographs yesterday of Liverpool training. Caoimhín Kelleher didn't seem to be there, so he's still not back in training, just 9 days away from that game against Serbia, and has never played against Ireland. The wild card now is Kieran Westwood, who was meant to be out for the game, but came back yesterday and played for Sheffield Wednesday. Westwood hasn't played for Ireland in 4 years, hasn't played a competitive game for Ireland in nearly a decade, but last month was saying, I would swim across the Irish Sea if the opportunity came up to play for Ireland again. So that's a big decision now for Stephen Kenny. Does he go with the future and a player who is used to stepping in at short notice in Caoimhín Kelleher and doing a good job for Liverpool?
If Kelleher's not fit, though, like, so Kelleher's got to play tonight or be on the bench tonight, or there's one last game, right? So, you know, can you pick a player who hasn't been fit at all?
I think that's what makes it even more difficult, that if Randolph was out and Kelleher was sitting on the bench for Liverpool for the last month, Kelleher probably would have started. But if he's not fully fit, it's a massive risk away to Serbia, as tough a game as they're going to have over the coming months. When you have somebody as experienced as Kieran Westwood there, you have Mark Travers as well, who's played a couple of times for Ireland off the bench, but again, isn't playing at club level. I heard Vinny Perth on Thursday night suggesting somebody like Ian Lawler, who's a bit more experienced, and I think he's playing with Bolton at the moment and is playing every week. You've Gavin Bazunu there, who's another emerging young player, but it does feel as though it's that choice of Westwood or Randolph.
Kelleher.
Westwood or Kelleher. He's had Kelleher at under 21 level, so he knows what he's all about. And if he can get back on the bench by next weekend, I'd expect it'll be Kelleher. But as you move through the pitch, there are options. So I think the only two players who were nailed on to start in the entire 11 are Enda Stevens at left back, and Conor Hourihane will definitely play somewhere in midfield. But whether it's Coleman or Doherty at right back, both of them are starting games once again. And Coleman looked back to fitness when he came off the bench for Everton at the weekend. Whether or not Shane Duffy starts or not, it's going to be a huge decision again. But Darragh Shane, Kieran Clark are both playing good football at club level. Stevens will play at left back. Then in midfield, Josh Cullen, I think, is somebody who will really come into the mix. Has played a lot of games for Anderlecht over the last few weeks, particularly with James McCarthy out. Last time Ireland played against Bulgaria, he played Hourihane in that number 6 role. Hourihane scored again at the weekend for Swansea in exactly the type of goal you feel he could score at international level, playing as a number 8 / a number 10. That sort of Frank Lampard style late run into the area. 5th goal since he went on loan to Swansea. So I think Hourihane, a midfield maybe of Hourihane, Cullen. Will he drop Jeff Hendrick? I know Hendrick struggled for form this season in and out of the Newcastle team. I felt Hendrick was probably maybe his best performer in the run of 8-9 games he had. I know a lot of people give him a huge amount of stick and didn't see that. I think he brings big energy to that midfield. But that would mean not starting Jason Knight or Jason Malumbi. Knight's obviously playing every week for Derby. Malumbi's dropped out of the side at Preston over the last few weeks. You know, is that giving the next generation the chance that sort of Stephen Kenny, it felt as though he had talked a lot about? If you stick with Hourihane and Hendrick, or do you go with a 2-3-1 in advance and you play Cullen and Knight, and then you play Hendrick maybe on the right, Hourihane as a 10, McLean potentially on the left? Again, there's a lot of players in the mix there.
Who's up front?
Daryl Horgan. Well, he played James Collins last time out. Collins hasn't been starting games for Luton over the past few weeks. I think he started at the weekend, but had dropped out of the team. I would go with Callum Robinson, but Callum Robinson hasn't played a minute for West Brom over the last couple of months. So that is the biggest issue. Where are the goals going to come from? Adam Mead is out. Aaron Connolly there's a rib injury and a few other things going on in his life at the moment as well that mean he's not going to be involved. So is it Collins? Is it Robinson? Is it Shane Long, who, again, has gone on loan to Bournemouth, scored a couple of goals when he arrived there, but hasn't been starting games over the last few weeks? That is going to be a tough decision. I would go with Robinson through the middle, and either side then, like McLean will have a good chance of starting. Again, he hasn't played because he's been injured and still isn't back for Stoke. Daryl Horgan was probably one of the brighter sparks of that run of games, came in from the cold and actually did very well when he came on. Alan Judge is a player who can play in any of those midfield or sort of attacking right positions, and will probably see a good bit of game time over this run of games. I think it's almost impossible to predict what that starting 11 is going to be 9 days out, which has got to be a worry.
Yeah, I think Doherty and Coleman will both start, to be honest. I think that's very likely away from home.
Potentially, yeah. And so is that your 4-2-3-1 and Doherty is the one on the right? Yeah. Or are you playing a diamond in midfield? Kenny, after that run of games in November, had said that he had intended playing Coleman and Doherty together at some stage. Again, when he was speaking to the fans groups last week, suggested it. And they are, arguably, our two players playing at the highest level. I know it hasn't been straightforward for Matt Doherty, and he got hammered at halftime and the coverage yesterday for his role in Arsenal's equaliser. But at his best, and maybe with Coleman behind him and relieved of any defensive responsibilities, you can get those late runs into the area that Matt Doherty was so brilliant at with Wolves last season.
Yeah, and he was better in the second half when they gave him a bit of cover. It was fairly obvious stuff. Nathan, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
Cheers, lads.
Nathan Murphy giving us some thoughts there. A reminder, Golf Weekly is now exclusively available on Patreon. Sign up and you're guaranteed a podcast every Thursday with extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year. There'll be interviews with golf's biggest names as well. Get on to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now. Just $3.99 plus VAT a month, or search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now. And for the guy who slid into my DMs correcting me on my pronunciation of Patreon, we actually had a meeting with the company and I was like, oh, do you guys call yourselves Patreon or Patreon? They're like, whatever you want. So keep sliding into my DMs and I'm going to keep calling it Patreon. Anyway, here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio for you today. At 10:30 live, the Cheltenham show is live with Paddy Power. Don't feel like a punter, feel like a favourite this Cheltenham. That's coming up at 10:30 every day this week for the Cheltenham Festival. OTB Gold is Colin Cooper at 1 o'clock. State of the Union, Michael Check and Andrew Mertens at 3. The split season, the hurling documentary is at 4. OTB Gold's Cora Staunton at 6. And live tonight, it'll be a full look back on all the weekend's action. We're back after these with the Gillette Performance Rankings.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
I guess I was that bit younger in your Premier League days. I didn't realise the Irish accent had survived this much.
I have to crank it down a bit with English people. And when I first started on Sky TV, they were very, very conscious of certain words I couldn't pronounce. Words with TH in it I found very, very difficult, so I'd have to practice. I'd be dreading them, say, was it a Thursday match and whatever, and they were trying to explain to me there was a H in the word Thursday and it wasn't TURS.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Get ready for the Cheltenham Festival with the Boyle Sports app, with a special offer guaranteed on every race, every day of the festival, plus extra places on each way bets over all 4 days. The Boyle Sports app has got you covered. Need to study up? Check out our Racing Post insights or watch our exclusive video previews with Cheltenham Gold Cup winning jockey Robbie Power. The Cheltenham Festival on the faster than ever Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie. 18 plus.
Tom Watson, you're welcome to Golf Weekly.
Hey, this is going to be fun.
Very happy to say European captain and, of course, 3-time major winner Padraig Carrington joins us.
Today's special guest on Golf Weekly is Lee Westwood.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm honoured and delighted.
Let's bring in Paul McGinley, who joins us now. Paul, you're very welcome.
Shane Lowry, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thanks, yeah. Well, I'm as good as I can be.
The biggest names in golf and Ireland's best golf podcast, Golf Weekly, now exclusively available on Patreon. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly to sign up now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da. Well, a lot of pressure on you, Eoin.
There is pressure on me, but the question is, where are the performances this week, of course? And from 5 to 1, we'll go through some of the bad performers of the weekend to the good performers of the weekend, as we do here every Monday. A load of good performers, thankfully not so many bad performers, but there is one that sticks out on a Premier League level, and we'll get straight into things here, into the red. Sheffield United. Terrible yesterday against Leicester City, and it's one of those situations where if Chris Wilder was manager, you would have felt a huge degree of sympathy for him, but because Chris Wilder has been nudged out of the football club, you feel a little less sympathy for Sheffield United. He took them from League One to the Premier League. He will go down as one of their all-time greatest managers, and dispute around not being supported enough, a dispute potentially around a director of football has been touted in the media as well over the last couple of days, and of course their terrible run of form means that he's out of the club. Paul Heckingbottom is the boss now, and after getting smashed 5-0, once Ian Astor scores a hat-trick against you, you know you're in dire straits. Billy Sharp came out after the game and said it's one of the worst performances since I've been back at the club. No excuses. Embarrassing performance from every single one of us. Very poor. So if Billy Sharp is saying it, that I'm happy enough to stick them in here in the red in this morning's performance rankings.
Okay, in case this is your first experience of the performance rankings, don't worry, we'll be gentle with you. It goes 2 in the red, 1 in the amber, and then 2 in the green. So we start off with the bad every weekend. We get to the mediocre, middling, grand. That's our amber, and then green is green for go, obviously the best performance of the weekend. But you out there can also get involved. We would like your thoughts on this, and we're going to give you the chance every week to win a Gillette Starter Pack. All you got to do is send in your suggestions to us on Twitter, on Instagram, via WhatsApp, however you want. We want the good, the grand, and the bad. So we've started in the red with Sheffield United. One of the stupidest decisions I think that any football team has made, getting rid of Chris Wilder. The way they did it, they didn't even have the ability to do it properly, like to walk in one day and go, okay, you're gone at the start of the week, and allow somebody to build up for the rest of the week. They were like, will we, how are we going to, should we maybe, what do you think? Yeah, let's tell everybody we're going to do it and then not do it for like 36 hours. Not a very good way to run a football club, and they got what they deserved. An Iheanacho hat-trick, as you said. What else is in the red this week?
Rory McIlroy is in the red this week. He ended up on 10 over par, didn't make the cut at the Players' Championship over the course of the weekend with rounds of 79 and 75. Then on Friday, he gave this interview.
What are you most frustrated with, Rory?
Probably like all the swing issues, and where it all stems from probably like October last year, doing a little bit speed training, sort of getting sucked into that stuff. Swing got flat, long, too rotational. Obviously added some speed and hitting the ball. What that did to my swing as a whole probably wasn't a good thing. So I'm sort of fighting to get back out of that.
You're obviously one of the longest players on the PGA Tour. Why do you think you went down that route?
I think a lot of people did. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't anything to do with what Bryson did at the US Open. I think a lot of people saw that and were like, whoa, you know, if this is the way they're going to set golf courses up in the future, it helps. It really helps. The one thing that people don't appreciate is how good Bryson is out of the rough. Not only because of how upright he is, but because his short irons are longer than standard, so he can get a little more speed through the rough than other guys. And I thought, you know, being able to get some more speed is a good thing, and I maybe just, you know, to the detriment a little bit of my swing, I got there, but I just need to maybe rein it back in a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, it's remarkable to say the least, isn't it? Like I
hadn't heard that. The one thing that everybody always said about Rory McIlroy was his swing was perfect. There's this story, which may be apocryphal or not, but it might have been his dad going to the local pro very early on or somebody who was associated with his coaching took him to somebody who was very high profile and said, here, I want you to have a look at him. You know, I've been working away, but I'm not doing that much with him. And the advice was, don't touch it. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Don't tamper with this. And now he's going through what a lot of golfers go through, and it's like you're in your own head. And you're in your own head specifically because the big man with the giant arms and that protein diet he's been on, you're like, no, don't do that. You be you. You were killing fields. Like, let's get your putting fixed. You'll be grand.
It's interesting to make things worse for Rory McIlroy. Bryson DeChambeau was then asked about McIlroy's comments, and he was like, I appreciate it, first off. I wasn't trying to influence anybody. I was just trying to play my own game. And he said that he knew that there would be people who would try and copy him, and some people who would potentially not work for them, and some people it may help. So I don't really know that, but I do appreciate Rory's comments, he said, which I'm sure is going to make Rory McIlroy feel a hell of a lot better this morning. You mentioned it there, hearing stuff from one of his early coaches about not wanting to screw anything up about this unbelievably pure, brilliant, natural swing. Well, one of the people who knows him very well is Paul McGinley, and here's what McGinley had to say on Sky Sports over the course of the weekend.
I really don't know. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw that last night and hearing him say it. But I'm not surprised. I know I can speak for this as a player myself and an ex-player, playing in these tournaments. We're like sheep. Professional golfers are like sheep, and unfortunately we follow somebody who's having success. What's incredible is one of the best drivers that we've ever seen in the game of golf thinks that he might need to find another 10 or 15 yards. That was not necessary. We all know where Rory's weaknesses are. His approach play, particularly over the last 12 months, 14 months, have really fallen off the planet, particularly his short irons. I mean, if you put his statistics together from 50 to 150 yards there, he's ranked 200 on the PGA Tour, which is nearly last.
There's part of this as well where you have to say McIlroy's being extremely honest. Like we heard in the first clip there where there is 20 seconds almost where he's trying to gather his thoughts and making a decision in his head whether or not he tells the world that Bryson had a massive impact on his game or not. I'm sure there are plenty of people in McIlroy's shoes who have also tried to change things with their game and ended up messing things up as a result of the Shambo. I'm sure there are plenty of people across world sport who look at what other teams are doing, what other individuals are doing, and try and copy them and end up putting detriment to their own game or whatever it may be. So I think there's part of this that is like McIlroy being uber honest, and then part of this which is also just absolutely extraordinary. And as you could hear there, McGinley does not hold back on what he's saying about McIlroy. It's just frustrating, I'd imagine, if you're in professional golfer's shoes looking at what's happening here and being able to see obviously what he's done to his own game.
Yeah, doesn't make that much sense. Okay, so McIlroy in the red and staying there for a while, it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So 10 over par is how he finished after 2 rounds. Didn't make the cut. The players. The grand then, in amber. There can only be one man who fits into amber this week, and it is Eric Lamela. Scores an absolutely outrageous goal to put Tottenham Hotspur 1-0 up in the North London Derby yesterday. Like, it's incredible that Eric Lamela's greatest strength is not his passing, it's not his mentality, it's not his defending, it's not his crossing, it is the art of the Rabona. Imagine being a player where doing Rabonas is the thing that you are best at. That is Eric Lamela. An absolutely outrageous goal, and nutmeg as well involved in it. So it was, and you could see Sergio Reguilon going crazy when he scored it. And then in the second half, Eric Lamela retreats to amber as a result of getting sent off. And he was lucky he didn't get sent off sooner, quite frankly. He was nibbling away at the Arsenal players, that bit of an edge that's always been around Lamela. He is a bit of a nuisance to play against, to put it lightly, and that nuisance spilled over to the point of him getting a second yellow card and getting sent off. So a very Lamela day from Eric Lamela, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, pretty dumb in that second half.
Yeah, completely. So I wouldn't go as far as to say he cost his team the game, which is a bit of a bad mark of where Tottenham were actually at yesterday. I think with 11 men on the pitch, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. And really, they were banging down the door in the last 10 minutes with 10 men on the pitch. The good then, into the green. Let's have a look at our list again. In the green, Irish hockey in at number 2 here. They lost game 1 on Saturday against Great Britain. They're playing a 3-game series against them at the moment. Then came from behind to win 2-1 yesterday. An absolutely brilliant win for them. Roisin Upton with the penalty, holding her nerve to beat the Brits yesterday. So that should be interesting going into the final game of the series. And then finally, as you can see in the green, English rugby. We have changed our tact here on the performance rankings. We are now putting Ireland's opponents at the top of the performance rankings rather than at the bottom of the performance rankings. We are building them up to the point that English people believe they should be at, which is the greatest team in the world. And sure, wouldn't we be doing great to go 80 minutes with them at the weekend?
That's it. If we could keep the ball kicked out to them, we'd be doing all right.
Yeah, absolutely. They were like, you have to give credit to England for how good that game was on Saturday. It sometimes feels that we hold the French up as the aristocrats of Six Nations rugby, and all the great games involve either some sort of French grace or some French flakiness. And I think England played their part in what was one of the best first halves of Six Nations rugby I've ever seen. One of the best 40 minutes full stop. It was sensational. Like, I know you were making the point earlier on, it's not fair to compare Saturday's game with Sunday's game when it comes to the quality, but it's impossible not to, and it's impossible not to think that England are operating at a higher level than Ireland's. Just a tad at the moment.
All right.
This weekend should be interesting.
Comparison, whatever that phrase is about comparing, it's a disease. We just need to stop comparing everything, and let's wait and see what happens next week. I mean, I don't think we're going to necessarily hammer England. I think we'll certainly play a game against them where it's relatively close heading into the final quarter, which I would consider progress the way that they've absolutely annihilated us the last couple of times they've played us. Some close near misses. Emma on WhatsApp says Chelsea's Frank Kirby needs an honourable mention for yesterday's Conti Cup final. 4 assists and 2 goals. Was on for a hat-trick but squared the ball to Sam Kerr for Kerr to grab a hat-trick. Kirby had a rare heart issue last year, missed almost all of the season, was ready to quit football, back this season better than ever. Mr. Murch says Lowe in the red. Exciting for Leinster, but a defensive liability for Ireland. Also, get the referee TMOs in green. Rightfully got grief for round 3, but almost flawless all weekend. Was Romain Poit nearly in your green?
Yeah, unbelievable performance from him. Put in 2 fantastic tackles as well. Absolute top-class defensive masterclass from Romain Poit.
He's going to wake up pretty sore this morning, getting absolutely... It was one of the 22-stone Scottish props who took him out in the first instance. We're like, whoa, I wouldn't like to be on the bottom of that. Keith Brennan on Twitter says, surely the Irish women's hockey team deserve a mention for the grand. Beat the Olympic champions, Great Britain and Belfast today to show their potential for an Olympic medal in the 2021 Olympics. We can do better than grand for that. That was definitely green. Niamh Kelly has had a sensational game for the Eagles this morning. Aisling Sheridan also scored another 2 goals for Collingwood, says Laura. Owen Murphy on Twitter says, Lee Westwood, the good. Ireland rugby team, the grand. And Sheffield United, the bad. Somebody was suggesting Aileen Gilroy should be in the bad for that tackle. Did you see the tackle? Absolutely. Yeah. I'm like, what? That should definitely be green. Not only is it entirely legitimate, it was bone crunching. And yeah, I would say that was green. A couple of other ones. James Lowe's in trouble. Joey Carberry, enough said, the man is back. I'm surprised that we haven't done 2.5 hours this morning on the astonishing break by Joey Carberry that showed that he's pretty close to being ready for whatever it is that's coming next. I mean, I didn't want to put Lions bolter Joey Carberry out there just yet, but like, how much more do we need to see?
Probably 1 test start is what we need to see for him to be a Lions bolter. But he was so good on Friday night, just that Shane Daly try, like just the ability to slice the defence open from a relatively deep starting point. We should point out here that he plays the game a little bit differently to a lot of the number 10s that have obviously made a breakthrough at international level for Ireland. He is just a different talent for Ireland. He's a better talent than most of the people of a similar age to him. And the sooner he is ready to play for Ireland, and if we've got to wait till next year, we've got to wait till the Six Nations next year for Joey Carberry to play for Ireland, I'm okay with that, as long as he feels fully confident in his body and the coaches feel fully confident in him.
Well, he must feel fully confident after playing that game and starting that game. Do you stick him on the bench for the game against England?
No.
Why not?
Big week the following week for Munster. I think that Johan van Graan will surely make a case about that this guy has started 1 game. He needs to play a full 80 minutes before he can be considered for that level. Like, it is a different... Like, if you watch a Munster game... 20
minutes off the bench.
Watch a Munster game compared to Ireland versus England games. Like, that level of physicality is just of a totally different... completely different galaxy, really.
I totally agree with you, to be honest. I think that there's a case for him being the sub for Munster for the rest of the season as well, as opposed to the starter, that actually you've got to give that body time to get seasoned back up to the point where this is really about the World Cup in 2 years' time as opposed to what's happening. However, if say he starts against Leinster and Munster win, and then he starts against Toulouse and Munster win, then Lions bolter suddenly doesn't look ridiculous. And that's not that ridiculous, that Munster would beat Leinster for the first time. They're due one, and then they'll be home. Okay, that's a very good side, but... Mikel Arteta for overseeing that win against Leicester and Spurs should be in the green. Tyg Byrne should be in the green, says Harrison. Tyg Fanning says, picking both Tygs, Byrne is now undroppable. Furlong's skills are world class and both have to be Lions. Tyg Furlong didn't get enough love on the show this morning. Yeah,
he was brilliant yesterday. That little jig around the middle of the park. He can step as well as Joey Carberry, I think is fair to say. Just a couple of other quick mentions on my end of things. Liam Scales, Shamrock Rovers, President's Cup goal. ESPN FC picks it up and says Dennis Bergkamp will be proud of the strike to their 2.3 million followers. Just, League of Ireland casually coming into the consciousness of soccer fans all around the world. He's normally a centre-back, was deployed on the left of midfield and ends up looking like Dennis Bergkamp. Not a bad outing for him. Not a bad weekend for the winners in the League of Ireland in general. Bohemians in their partnership with Fontaine's DC on the front of a pretty cool New Jersey with a section, a good wedge of cash going towards the homeless as well, is surely a win for Bows and for the league in general.
No, 100%. Football cliches were on Twitter after the Rabona going, well, if this happened in the Artistic League, we'd all be going mad about it, so fair play. A reminder, every Monday morning on OTB AM, we're giving you the chance to win a Gillette Starter Pack. To enter, all you got to do is send your suggestions to us on Twitter and Instagram, WhatsApp, however you want. We want the good, the bad, and the grand. That's the performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
Congratulations to Matthew Merchant. You've won a Gillette Starter Pack. You got in touch with us, and you are our winner this morning. We'll give you another chance to win on the performance rankings next week. Good man, Matthew, for that. OTB AM is live weekday mornings from 7:30 in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Join us tomorrow morning. We're talking rugby with Matt Williams and Neil Tracy in the Type 5. There's football with Vinnie Perth and much more as well. And don't forget to join us for our Cheltenham show at 10:30. Right now, more reaction to the weekend sport. We're going to hear from Brian Kerr and first Mike McCarthy on Ireland-Scotland.
Mike McCarthy, the former Ireland, Leinster and Connacht second row, joins us. Mike, I think the word is relief.
Absolute relief, and what drama there at the end. It was 24-all after Hamish Watson managed to somehow get over the line. He twisted and he turned and he eventually got over it. Had to go to the video ref, a bit like Itoji's try yesterday, but it was the grounding was ruled that it was a try. It was a great finish, but then some inspirational stuff from Ryan Bird off the bench, adding real impact, just what you want your bench to do. He came off, he charged down Ali Price's box kick. He then followed it up with a tackle near the touchline, and then I think it was Jack Conan got in for the poach and the penalty. But what a kick from Johnny Sexton from the touchline, with Warren Gatland sat in the stand watching. An incredible finish, exciting finish, and a great performance by Ireland.
That is leadership. Over 900 points now for his country. That's what it's all about.
Exactly, and he completely orchestrated the game. I mean, questions about his age and his form coming into the game, and he does what he does best, and he just stood up. He led from the front. He put Ireland in the right areas of the field, kicked the corners, real confidence in kicking to the corners instead of taking the points at goal that were on offer. And I think that led into the team and gave the team confidence as the game went on. But I think it was a really strong performance from Ireland right from the start. Real physical in the carry. On the flip side, their defence was really good and physical. The penalty count was very low. Set piece was good. They were getting on top of the scrum, and yeah, just a really good performance that Ireland can be happy with moving forward after that Italy game.
But we nearly let it slip, 24 points to 10 in front. Why was that?
Yeah, I think there was one stage we were just napping. The Hugh Jones try where he came on, I think it was a penalty from the scrum on the halfway. Scotland passed the ball to the right, and Hugh Jones just ghosted through like a bit of a napping defence. He just went directly in between two players. So we know against Scotland, if you clock off for 1 second, we know what the likes of Hogg and Finn Russell can do, and that's what they did. So I think it's just keeping that concentration for the full 80 minutes. But to go away to Scotland, who had a great performance, beating England, as we know, it's a really good win. But perhaps Scotland were a little bit rusty. They haven't played for a month with that France game being cancelled. But real positive signs going forward.
Before we talk about the positives, it is, suppose, worth, given you mentioned the tries they scored, pointing out James Lowe, a couple of defensive issues around his play. Could it cost him his international place now?
Well, yeah, I think Andy Farrell obviously believes in him, and we know what he does going forward. We know how big and physical he is in the carry going forward, drawing in defenders when he's carrying the ball, and what that does is narrows down the opposition's defence and creates space. On the flip side, his defence, there's been a few questions asked, and I think it was himself and Hugo Keenan were kind of at fault for the Hugh Jones try, but we know Andy Farrell will back him, and he's continuously progressing in that area, so hopefully it continues.
I think the player of the tournament for Ireland so far has been Tadhg Byrne. Another try today and a great performance.
Yeah, he just backs it up week in, week out, and you wonder after a performance like that how much he's got left in the tank to go in again the week after, but he just does it. When he was at Scarlets, he did it week in, week out. He does it week in, week out for Munster, and now he's doing it week in for Ireland. The work rate he gets through, you look at the stats after the games, he's normally top for first arrival at the breakdowns, line-out steals, ball carries, etc., and yeah, he was just real workman-like today. He got through so much work. And that's one area where Ireland really got on top as well is the Scottish line-out is notoriously very strong, and Ireland really frustrated Scotland there. CJ Stander with a steal, I think James Ryan with a couple of steals, Tadhg Byrne. Probably the Paul O'Connell effect. They really, really disrupted that Scottish line-out and gave him absolutely no platform to play from.
You played with Paul O'Connell, Mike. What is it that he's doing that's making this line-out effective for Ireland at the moment?
I think first of all, it's that aura he brings just being in the camp, and the standards he sets within the camp, and everyone wants to achieve those standards, and those standards are higher than most most other people's standards. So he's a great leader in terms of he's been there and done it and what he's achieved, but it's his attention to detail, and not just the line-out where we saw against France, the line-out for Ireland, the defensive line-out was really good. They frustrated that French line-out, and it's an almost instant impact from Paul O'Connell with the line-out, especially in defence, but also the breakdown. I think today, the ferocity and dynamism at the breakdown, the reaction of the guys clearing the breakdown out, the reaction to the ball carrier was phenomenal, and there was a real nasty edge and bite to Ireland's breakdown today. So I'm just really excited about that performance. And there were questions asked whether it could be backed up after that Italy performance, which was a great win, but the answer is yes. Fantastic win today and performance.
And Robbie Henshaw's playing really consistent rugby at the moment. He scored the first try.
He scored the first try, and recently hitting his 50th cap. And not only that, on the flip side, his defence, he stopped DJ van der Merwe up the left-hand flank when he was racing towards a touchline. A bit of a try-saving tackle from Robbie Henshaw, and a real physical one against a big man. So yeah, he's playing really well and leading with his actions in terms of everyone else following him. So it's great to see.
It's a little bit of a worry that we didn't see Conor Murray at all. Like, we're 24-10 up. Maybe you want a bit of experience in there to calm things down, because it could have gone the other way, and just not to see him on the pitch at all. You Gibson Park and Sexton there for the whole time. That, to me, struck me as a hurler on the ditch is a bit strange.
Yeah, well, we know what Conor Murray brings, that calming influence and tactical brilliance that him and Johnny Sexton have together. But, Jameson Gibson Park's been playing incredibly well. He's a real live wire. And I thought he played really well today. Maybe hasn't been given credit for how well he's performed over the last few games. So that's testament to, what the coaching staff and Andy Farrell think of him to keep him on in that real high-intensity pressure situation. Obviously, Jameson Gibson Park and Sexton play together at Leinster, so they know there's that kind of togetherness there when they're in, dark, difficult places. So, real belief in him, and how exciting to have Conor Murray, and we didn't use him, but exciting to have that experience there as well.
A lot of talk and criticism at times about the attacking play and Mike Catt and that kind of thing. Did we see a lot of offloading today? Did we see width in the play? What was the general game plan? Did you see a clear identity from Ireland today?
I think there was a bit of progression. I mean, you can't compare the performance in attack versus Italy to Scotland, because we know the difference in the quality of the sides. But I think we did see a bit of progress. There's some lovely bits of handling, especially amongst the forwards. I remember some great footwork from Tyg Furlong.
The shimmy, great shimmy, wasn't it? He needs to trademark that.
getting Finn Russell back for skinning him earlier. But it's good to see, because not like maybe perhaps in the past we've been criticised for running directly into bodies, and it's great to see like that example from Tyg Furlong, a bit of footwork, moving the focus of the attack. When you teaching kids, you tell them not to run at the tree trunks, run at the branches. And I think we saw that today. And the offloads, they were pushing the offloads a bit more against France. That wasn't really pushed. Those 50-50s weren't given, and I think we saw a bit more of that today. But ultimately, the performance in attack came from the platform. The forwards gave them a great platform up front. The scrum was very dominant, definitely on top there. The maul was pretty good, and the forwards really laid the platform for the rest of the team to play well. And Ireland's picking and going game was very good as well.
Which players could be pushing for a starting place against England? Any of them now, you think?
Well, possibly Ryan Bird, because James Ryan went off there with possibly a head knock. I'm not 100% sure what the situation was, but Ryan Bird played brilliant. His first touch against Italy in his first cap, and then instant impact off the bench, as we've just spoken about there, with the charge down and the tackle on Ali Price leading to the penalty. So perhaps Ryan Bird, and it's hard to change a winning team, especially on the basis of that performance. But the bench is phenomenal as well. To have that bench, that power with Kelleher, Kilcoyne, Porter coming on, Baird coming on, Jack Conan, Murray didn't come on, Burns and Lamela didn't come on. But that experience and that power and dynamism is very exciting to have on the bench. So I don't think we'll see too many changes. Obviously, maybe the concern now coming into the next game against England is they've had one more day to recover, which is quite a big thing in Test rugby. But certainly Ireland can take a lot of positives and go into that England game at home with a lot of confidence.
So you're not too worried that we didn't use the bench maybe a little bit earlier, like Kelleher and Larmour came on after the 60-minute mark?
Oh, no, I'm not too worried. I really do think it was a great performance by Ireland. Yeah. And Scotland, to their credit, they're a quality side, as we saw with their performance against England. They were Scotland also in complete control against Wales until the card situation arose. So I think Ireland can be really happy. They went away from home under a bit of criticism, and they produced and they really stood up, and led by that man Johnny Sexton from the front.
And the lads will enjoy the trip home. It's unusual. You can't celebrate as you normally would. Not that they really would be celebrating with another game to go, but they'll have a pep in their step now.
Oh, definitely. And I think a massive kind of bit of sense of relief and a real opportunity to go out and finish the campaign against England, on a high. And, what a way it would be to finish. England have proved to be real difficult opponents for us over the last number of occasions. England have certainly got on top of us in physically wise. To be fair, they've dominated us in that physicality aspect. So I'm sure going into the final game, that's going to be a big emphasis on a big finish and bringing a real physicality that puts them with a chance of winning the game against England.
And that's in Dublin next Saturday. How many levels do we need to go up, Mike, to beat England and finish this campaign with 3 wins?
I think we've got another gear, and hopefully we'll see a bit more progression. But against England, we know today Ireland had that platform. They had that set piece parity in the scrum, in the maul, in the picking and going game, in their defence. Scotland, testament. We know how dangerous Scotland are in attack, and we've seen it during the Six Nations. But they kind of contained Scotland. I know Scotland scored 3 tries, but they contained them a bit today with a real physical defence. They were winning the inches, winning the gain line. And I think if they bring that platform, they bring that physicality in defence and that dynamism and physicality in the carry, they'll be in a good place. But maybe they can, push the offload even more. Those 50-50s, which we didn't see at all against France, I think we can still push those a bit more and create even more opportunities for us as an attacking team.
There's not going to be much that's going to happen, really. It'll be a lot of... it'll be a decompression really now. There's not going to be that much done on the paddock. It'll be more about the tactics and the working out how we're going to attack England in a way that's going to catch them on the hop next weekend. You can't do that much now in the next 6 days.
No, it's a short window, and as we said, England have got that extra day to recover, which is massive in Test match rugby. But it'll be all about analysing this performance and then very quickly turning the page, moving on to the week ahead, looking at the threats of England. There won't be too much physical stuff. Monday, they'll be off Monday, so they'll probably have only one full day on the pitch, which will probably be Tuesday. It'll be a lot more analysis, a lot of walkthroughs, getting an understanding of the game plan and individual analysis, and hoping that they can come into that England game with a real freshness in the air, in the legs, which will allow them to bring that physicality that they need to play England. There's no point going into this week and knocking each other, bashing each other about, mauling and contact drills. You need to be fresh in the legs so you can bring that physicality at the weekend for the game.
Okay, Mike, well, thanks so much for speaking to us this afternoon. And we've won, and we just about, but that's all that matters. We won the game, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
We saw Enda Stevens play today, had a quiet game, was on the back foot, not the marauding full-back we saw for Sheffield United last season, but at least he got through the full 90 minutes, and he's probably one of the few guaranteed starters for Stephen Kenny in Serbia in 10 days' time. This feels very similar to what we saw in October, November, with injuries already starting to pile up. Darren Randolph is out, John Egan is out, Adam Ida is out, James McCarthy, Aaron Connolly. There's doubts over Caoimhín Kelleher. This feels like a mountain now again that Stephen Kenny has to climb going to Serbia for the first game.
Yeah, but some of the players that you mentioned there weren't playing. They can't all play together. And James McCarthy has played very, very little for Stephen. I think the goalkeeper one is a very important one because experience. Darren Randolph has always shown he stands up on the big days. He stands up on it nearly every day playing for Ireland. You have to say he's been our most consistent player. He's had to adapt to slight change of style with Stephen Kenny. I think there's an overemphasis on the whole thing in relation to the change and the build up from the back. I think every manager to a degree wanted to build up the back, but you look at the players you have and the opposition you're playing against and decide whether it's appropriate on the day in question. But I think Darren Randolph has been a key player, and Kevin Keller, you mentioned his difficulties, not a lot of experience.
Kieran Westwood played today for Sheffield Wednesday. He was meant to be out injured, but obviously he's come back quicker than expected.
There's some talk about him, and he said that he'd never say no to Ireland.
So what do you do as you've been in this position, because you have Quinlan Keller, who's never played for Ireland, has obviously played some big days for Liverpool, or a Kieran Westwood who has buckets of experience behind him but hasn't really been involved in recent years? That's a difficult decision.
I was never in that situation. I always had experienced goalkeepers available in my time. When I started, I inherited Shay Given and Dean Kiley, and then I would have brought in one or two others, Nicky Colgan and Paddy Kenny and John Murphy, who hopefully get on the pitch today at Wembley for Tranmere. But I didn't have that situation, and maybe that was a mistake by Stephen, that he didn't give one of the other goalkeepers a go in the 8 games he had this year, that he stuck with Darren Randolph, and now he's in a situation he's not available, so he doesn't have a goalkeeper that's played. But that doesn't mean the goalkeeper that hasn't played can't perform. You always have to have the first day for the international team, and
well, look at Darren Randolph. His first day was that night against Germany.
Exactly, and he came on the match. He didn't even start the match. So there you go. So that. But I think the other positions out the pitch, Ida and Connolly, I felt that there was an over dependence on young players who were very inexperienced, who had very few games under belt at first team level. Anyway, and I think McGoldrick was an important one. Unfortunately, he's out. But who knows what way it's going to go? I mean, do we end up with Shane Long playing centre forward in the match against Serbia? May not be the worst thing that can happen. I think around the middle of the field, there's lots of different players that played in the midfield positions. As I said, James McCarthy hasn't played very much. I think Jeff Hendrick is an important player. I think Robbie Brady have been important players, and both of them have been playing reasonably regularly, bits and pieces in Brady's case lately. I think they're important players. Their experience, Enda Stevens important, as you mentioned today. Seamus Coleman's been getting some football, not enough, but Doherty's playing today for Spurs. He's been in and out, but playing, seems to be fit. The fact that he's playing such a big match today would indicate he's in good shape. The centre-half positions could be a problem. Shane Duffy's obviously confidence. But the fact that his confidence is struggling playing for Celtic, that doesn't mean it necessarily affects him playing for the Republic of Ireland either.
So would you have seen that? Because we always hear players love coming into the Ireland camp. It's a different thing, obviously, in COVID times, but that where you may have watched players who struggle at club level, there's something about when they get away from that, when you get away from the stress and strains of everyday life, that there's a bit of relief of getting to the international setup.
I've seen it with players, not so much when I managed Ireland myself, but I've seen it with players before that. When I was manager of Ireland, the players who played centre backs, the likes of Andy O'Brien and Kenny Cunningham was doing the commentary for us this afternoon. They were, Gary Breen, they were playing well at the clubs. They were playing regularly. Richard Dunn, there was a lot of competition for the centre-back play. And I stuck with Andy O'Brien and Kenny a fair bit because they played well as a partnership for me. But I rarely went to matches when they didn't do well at their clubs either. Their club form was relevant to me. But I made the decision based on what they did playing for Ireland as well, playing for the national team. So I think Stephen Kenny will probably look at Shane Duffy in that light, that he's done all right for us. He's looked a bit awkward and not as comfortable in trying to play it out in the back and playing running with the ball and running into midfield and playing it out to the right back. But I think that's an area, with John Egan's injury, that could be a bit of a problem. But the good news is that Kieran Clark is playing, and Stephen has said he's seen him and he's left-footed and so on. So I think that, while there may be problems, and you can rule out players and say, but that's the way it works for international football. It works in club football as well. But international football, you don't have control of it. You wait and you pray and you hope that the ones you want turn up on the day, and it's the last match before the players come in is the one that most concerns you. That Saturday and Sunday games, they're the ones that you're hoping that you get the call that all is clear. That's what I remember. That's the way I operated. I waited on each player to text me, say they were okay. But the ones that didn't text you, then you got worried. Then you were making the phone calls. And the last thing you wanted to hear was a phone call from the manager or a physio at a club to tell you there was trouble. But you can't control that, and you just got to make the best of it. And kind of dismiss the idea that you're under strength, not make excuses before the match. After the match, if you want to throw it in there, if it doesn't go well. But you're better off just ignoring it to a degree and be delighted about who turns up and telling them they're the ones they want anyway and get on with it and win the match.
Great stuff as always, Brian.
Thank you, Nathan.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razor.